Chapter 1146. She actually called the police instead of notifying the Martialist Association. Was this her last mercy? After all, in a sense, the association was not bound by the law, so it paid special attention to the behavior of martialists, and the internal punishment was often more severe than the law. No. Roland twitched the corner of his mouth. Why is she still thinking about this at this critical moment? I don't know if I should call the police or deal with it internally. I didn't do anything, so I have a clear conscience. Anyway, I have to calm her down first. Call the police. Roland pretended to be surprised. Why? Why are you asking me why? Garcia said exasperatedly. What did I tell you before? Awakened people can easily fall into delusions of transcendence, lose themselves, and fall into depravity because of the power they obtain by chance. That's why martialists need to restrain themselves and guard their hearts. I don't want to interfere with your private life. It's okay to see girls coming out of your house, but they're not adults at all. The expansion of desire is one of the most obvious signs of depravity. Don't you understand? Compared to the time he spent with the three girls, she was actually more angry at him for indulging his desire and embarking on a path of no return. I understand, but the problem is, if I really did what you said, why did I bring you here to witness the scene? Roland sighed. Don't you think it doesn't make sense at all? In fact, whether I did those things or not, it's easy to attract criticism, so the right thing to do is to avoid them being seen by others. But I took the initiative to let you see them. Don't you think there might be something fishy about it? Garcia blinked her eyes and slowly put down the phone in her hand. Why? Roland secretly heaved a sigh of relief and said in the most sincere tone, this is what I want to explain next. Miss Garcia. I need your help. Half an hour later. So, those girls who came out of your room don't have that kind of relationship with you, but are part-time tutors? Garcia asked with narrowed eyes. That's right, Roland said calmly. They're all college students from nearby. Besides tutoring Zero, they can also teach these three girls. However, this was not a solution. If they taught them for a long time, they would become suspicious of their identities. After all, they were young, and it would be strange if they did not go to school. I had no choice but to replace him with a new candidate before the tutor became suspicious. He had been very careful in dealing with the problem of the gods' punishment witches. The residents of the community had seen at most 3 or 4 witches walking out from 0825. This reason was not convincing, but at least it was reasonable. When you stood me up for the first time, you mentioned on the phone that relatives came to our house. Are you referring to these 3 people? Hey, that was more than half a year ago. Are you still brooding over it? Yes, but they are not my real relatives. They are from the same village. Roland lied with a straight face. Donnan, Saint Miran, Dodo and I live in the same village, on the same street. When I left the village, they were still playing in the mud by the pond. If these words were spoken in the normal world, it would be as strange as excellent red flag bearer Edison, or national tractor model Faraday. Fortunately, the dream world had integrated his and Zero's memories, so it did not sound strange at all. Then why didn't they register? Roland paused for a moment. Because of their gender. I see. Garcia was silent for a long time. When she spoke again, her eyes were much softer. Are there many people like them? Yes, but it's only changed in the last 10 years. Seeing that the conversation was going better than he had expected, Roland seized the opportunity to say, the news that I joined the Martialist Association has spread in the village. They probably don't want to stay in that small place for the rest of their lives, so they came here to seek refuge with me. Your brother Roland is telling the truth. Please let us stay here. I want to go to school. The 3 of them made up the last part in time. Garcia slightly turned her head away, seeming to be hesitating. Neither private tutors nor self-study can solve the fundamental problem. I hope they can live a normal life like ordinary people. Among all the people I know, you're the only one who can do this, Roland said slowly. Even if Garcia could not do it, the Clover Group could. For such a large and powerful family business, it was not difficult for them to fill in a few illegal accounts. Apparently, Garcia had also thought of this. After struggling for a while, she let out a long sigh and said, "I'm sorry, I can't help you." Before Roland could speak, Garcia continued, "I've left my family and said I'd never see my father again. Moreover, the Clover Group still wants to demolish the apartment. If I go to him, he'll definitely make a big deal out of it. If that happens, there may be a rift in the protest team that supports me because of their trust in me." He wanted to say something more, but when he saw Garcia's clenched fists, he swallowed his words. She was sad that she could not help a stranger. This made Roland feel a little guilty. "I understand. But you can talk to him in person." Garcia raised her head and said, "Tomorrow night, my father will invite outstanding martialists to a hotel in the city center. Although he knows I won't go, he still sent me an invitation. This will at least show the media that he's still trying to save his family." She put on a ridiculous expression and said, "Although it's not your name on the invitation, you can enter the venue as a substitute. As long as I call the organizer, you can enter the venue with the invitation. The good thing about a substitute is that it can be either acceptance or rejection. If I choose you as my substitute, it will undoubtedly mean that I refuse." Roland immediately understood what Garcia meant. If Garcia invited his master, Lon, to attend the banquet, it would be the opposite in the eyes of others. It was like sending a gift to congratulate him, but sending a gift away would be a taunt. "Talk to him in person," Roland said while touching his chin. "What's wrong? Are you scared? You have to go even if you're scared. You've already done so much." Compared to his status as the king of Greycastle, this kind of banquet was just a small event for Roland. "I'm more worried that I'll have to go back empty-handed. After all, this kind of rejection is tantamount to ridicule them." "Don't worry. My father is not an unreasonable person. In business, especially in transactions, he only cares about profits," Garcia said with a smile. "And you're not an ordinary martialist. Even the Prism City has noticed your growth. Don't underestimate yourself." Roland vaguely understood what Garcia meant. "I'll try my best. To be honest, I'm very happy." Garcia stood up and reached out her right hand to him. "It turns out that you've never deviated from the path in your heart. On the contrary, I misunderstood you. I owe you this. I'm sincerely proud to have a martialist like you as my fighting partner." She paused for a moment and then said, "Also, if you need my help in the future, just tell me. Don't call me Miss Garcia anymore. It doesn't suit you." Roland slowly reached out his hand and held hers. Although most of what he said was a lie, he did not forget his goal for a moment. He wanted to break the shackles of the divine will, discover the truth of the world, and save mankind from the endless battle of destiny. Chapter 1147. Due to the difference in the flow of time, they could sleep for 2 days at a time. The next day, after arranging for the gods' punishment witches, Roland drove the 3 witches to the Crown Hotel in the center of the city for the banquet. "Your Majesty, can we really eat whatever we want there?" Donnan poked her head out from the back seat and asked, her eyes shining. "Of course. It's no different from a banquet held by the nobles. You must have attended many banquets like this in the Union, right? But we can't eat whatever we want at those banquets. Can't we?" Roland asked curiously. "Yes." Saint Miran, who was sitting in the passenger seat, nodded. "Those who are invited to the banquet are all important people. Making friends is more important than eating. No one wants to talk to someone with a greasy mouth. Eating without restraint will only invite ridicule. If the banquet is long, most people will choose to eat first before going to the banquet." She swallowed her saliva and said, "If this behavior will damage His Majesty's reputation, we can totally tolerate it." Roland glanced at the three witches through the rearview mirror and could not help laughing. Don't worry. When have I ever gone back on my word? This is not the Union, nor is it the King's City of Greycastle. We're playing the role of ordinary people. As long as we don't disturb others, we can eat whatever we want. Then, can I sneak some food back? Dodo asked excitedly. There are many sisters who also want to experience the standard of banquets in this world. Just don't be discovered, Roland said casually. When the time comes, follow me. Don't stray too far away from me. If anyone tries to talk to you, just pretend you didn't hear it. I'll deal with it. Yes, Your Majesty, the three witches said in unison. About half an hour later, they arrived at their destination. As soon as they entered the door, Roland felt the difference. Almost all the luxury cars parked around the front yard of the hotel were worth at least $1 million. The clean paint on the cars was as shiny as a mirror. In contrast, the van he drove was quite eye-catching. Although robbing fallen evils made a lot of money, it was still several orders of magnitude lower than that of a real capitalist. In order not to attract attention, the van he bought was only an ordinary brand, which would not attract much attention no matter where he went. However, here, he was the most eye-catching one. Sir, the hotel doesn't accept outsiders today. May I ask if you have an invitation letter? After parking the car at the entrance, the receptionist quickly walked up. Roland took out the card Garcia had given him and waved it in front of him. Welcome to the Crown Hotel. The venue is on the top floor, and there are people in the lobby to receive you. The man smiled warmly and said, Please let me park your car. Roland sighed inwardly. No matter what these people thought, they were still polite on the surface. When he led the witches into the magnificent lobby, the three witches were much calmer than he had expected. Perhaps spacious and bright buildings were not rare in the tequila era. After all, stones of lighting were once common in the upper echelons of the witch empire. For example, the crystal chandelier overhead, which looked very expensive, was probably just an ordinary item in the palace where the three chiefs resided. Roland was amused when he thought that the magnificent decoration was not even comparable to a few cream cakes. The appearance of the witches immediately attracted the attention of several people. It seemed that no matter which world they were in, their appearance was enough to attract people's attention. After a more detailed inspection, the receptionist scanned the card and reported to him through the walkie-talkie. Then she handed the invitation card back to him. Mr. Roland, sorry to keep you waiting. May I ask if these three ladies are your cousin? Roland shrugged and said, Garcia told me that relatives are allowed to enter the hotel. I see. Please follow me. The receptionist escorted them into the elevator and pressed the button for the top floor. She then placed her hand on her chest and saluted outside the door. Have a good time tonight. After a while, the elevator suddenly lit up. The wall that surrounded them suddenly disappeared under their feet. The afterglow of the setting sun shone into the elevator, and at the same time, a city full of tall buildings came into view. The buildings formed an unbroken horizon. Even as far as the eye could see, there were still rows of walls of buildings. Only then did the witches exclaim in a low voice. Even the three holy cities combined are not as big as this city, Donnan said in a low voice. No matter how many times I see it, it's hard to imagine that mortals without magic power could create all this. The miracle building that you want to build is also for commemoration, right? Saint Miran looked at Roland. He smiled noncommittally. Although he had never told anyone about his origin except for Anna, it was common knowledge among the tequila witches that he came from a place similar to the dream world. Otherwise, they could not explain why he was so familiar with this incredible world. When they arrived at the top floor, a large circular banquet hall appeared in front of them. Apart from the ground, the walls and the dome were almost entirely made of glass. Standing by the wall, they could have a panoramic view of most of the city, as if they were looking down at all the mountains in the city. The fact that the Clover Group was able to hold a banquet in such a place showed how powerful the Clover Group was. The dining table in the hall was filled with all kinds of food, from cold dishes to pastries, fruits to champagne towers. The guests gathered in groups of 2s and 3s, and there were hundreds of them. Obviously, they were not only martial artists, but also businessmen and politicians. In the past, he would have been very reserved in such a high-class banquet, but now, Roland had already gotten used to it. After entering the hall, he led the witches straight to the main topic, the dishes on the table in the back. Wow, this fish is so tender. It feels like it's melting in my mouth. Are these really grapes? Ah, I haven't tasted such sweetness for a long time. Don't talk nonsense. You just came to the dream world last month, right? But last time, we only had fast food. That idiot Elena only ordered kaifeng dishes and lanlu. Hey, don't just eat. Put something in Dwudwa's pocket, okay? Roland looked at the excited witches, who were swallowing their saliva, and shook his head with a smile. He suddenly felt that even if the dream world could not bring him any benefits, he should let this place continue to exist. For him, this place might be the realm of nothingness, but for the survivors of Tequila, it was the only place where they could feel that they were still alive. The taste, the touch, the smell, they could only be compensated here for everything they had lost in the fight against the demons. Before the banquet officially began, Roland carefully looked at the other guests. Basically, the guests were divided into two groups. Those who wore formal clothes were the members of society, while those who wore the robes of the Martialist Association were basically his peers. Although this division was not necessarily accurate, for example, because he had just become an official member, he had not been issued a robe and could only wear formal clothes to attend the banquet. But in general, no one in the hall was dressed strangely, which was completely different from the scene he had seen in the Prism City last time. Is this the difference between the awakened in the academy and the awakened in the wild? He could not help but think of what Garcia had said. Although the Martialist Association is an organization that aspires to save the world, ideals alone are not enough to gather enough people. That's why the Martialist tournament came into being. Less than 50 years after its birth, it has already become the most watched competition in the world. Through the competition, the awakened ones could gain more exposure, fame, and income. The competition also injected countless new blood into the association. This caused the martial arts competition to become more and more important in the association. Those who performed well would also have a higher say in the matter. This change even caused disagreements among the upper echelons, and the members of the association gradually divided into the old and the new. But in the end, the Martialist tournament did not shrink, but further expanded. At that time, Roland was more inclined to the old faction. After all, the real enemy of the Martialists was the fallen evils, who would fight to the death. This kind of battle was not comparable to competitive sports. As a means to attract new blood, it could be said to be a good and effective method, but it was difficult to understand why it was allowed to affect the upper echelons. The Martialist tournament was not the same as a life-and-death battle. Such a simple truth should be understood by those people, but from the result, the new faction had the upper hand. He had always been unable to understand the reason behind it, but now that he saw the scene in the hall, he suddenly understood a little. The members of the association who did not participate in the Martialist tournament were basically the desperate wild awakened. They were disobedient and had a terrible image. Their overall quality was not at the same level as these star Martialists. Moreover, the opportunity to fight the fallen evils was not always available, and they could die if they were not careful, which inevitably led to fewer and fewer voices supporting the old faction. He was afraid that the old faction would not be able to return to the leading position until the erosion officially broke out. Thinking of the hunting license, Roland could not help but twitch the corner of his mouth. He had always felt that it was strange for the association to issue such a thing to a newcomer who had just joined the association for half a year. No matter how outstanding his performance was, he should not have been able to enter the top 100 of the association. But now it seemed that not participating in the Martialist tournament, wholeheartedly opposing the fallen evils, and not seeking fame or profit, was a perfect match for the old faction. Chapter 1148. While Roland was sizing up the crowd, someone in the crowd was also sizing him up. So, did you find anything about him? Carwin asked his subordinate in a low voice. Yes, the subordinate whispered. His family background is very ordinary. It was only a coincidence that he became Miss Roland's neighbor. There's no record of Roland on the martial arts ranking list, so he should have never participated in a match. It's been 3 months since he joined the Martialist Association. It's not a common situation. Although Carwin had not awakened the force of nature, he was no stranger to the Martial Arts League. As the most popular event, most people were familiar with its rules and regulations. Except for the Martialist tournament, which was held once every 2 years, all the other tournaments could be regarded as tryouts. They were so varied that even the newly awakened could participate in a junior tournament every month. Generally speaking, a rookie who had just joined the association would be eager to compete on the stage in order to improve his ability and ranking. After all, it meant a higher status and income. Only those awakened ones who joined the awakened halfway would be resistant to this kind of competition where they could display their abilities in public. Of course, the credibility of this reason was also questionable. He believed that those arrogant fellows had committed crimes and were unwilling to expose themselves in front of the camera. As Garcia's elder brother, Carwin was naturally very concerned about his sister's surrogate. As far as he knew, Garcia was definitely not a person who was easy to get close to. Because she was so persistent in her beliefs, there was an invisible wall between her and others. If they wanted to cross it, it would be extremely stressful for both of them. Therefore, there were very few people who could win her trust. Carwin was not surprised that Garcia had fallen out with her father. She might be a qualified martialist, but she was definitely not a qualified businesswoman. However, this was not the only reason why he investigated Garcia. It was just one of the reasons. The other main reason was the VIP seats in the front of the banquet hall. He looked towards the first row of seats, only to see a woman dressed entirely in white sitting there. She wore a martial arts robe that didn't have any decorations on it, which made her seem even more ethereal and refined. Her long black hair cascaded down her back like a waterfall. Just looking at her back was enough to amaze people. Fei Yuhan was the most dazzling star of the martial competition. It had only been 5 years since her debut, but she had already made it to the finals of the martial competition twice. Although she had yet to win the championship, most people thought that it was just because she was too young and inexperienced. As long as she had enough time, the title of the strongest would definitely be hers. With such outstanding talent, she was regarded as the representative of the new generation of geniuses. It was even rumored that the day she won the championship would be the day she would enter the upper echelons of the Prism City. Carrie had thought that a person like her would ignore the Clover Group's invitation. She had not expected that she would attend the banquet in person, which surprised her father. With Fei Yuhan's attendance, this banquet would definitely become the most eye-catching headline in recent times. However, when he finally found a chance to talk, he was entrusted with an unexpected task. Carwin suppressed his distracting thoughts and slowly walked up to the man. Miss Fei Yuhan, the thing you asked me to find out, you don't have to repeat yourself. I heard everything, she interrupted, then smiled. Thank you. Did you hear that? Carwin looked back in surprise at where he had come from. He was almost 10 meters away from her, and he was in the noisy banquet hall. Could a martialist really have such acute senses? She was simply inhuman. Of course not. Even if my ears could hear everything, my brain wouldn't be able to process it. Fei Yuhan probably noticed his bewilderment and explained, which she rarely did. When your subordinates approached you, I intentionally increased my vigilance. After that, as long as you concentrate, you can reconstruct the entire conversation through the shape of your mouth, your voice, and your facial expressions. It's not difficult for most martialists to do so. I see. I see. You're indeed the strongest martialist, Carwin said with an uneasy smile. The strongest? Her voice was as melodious as a wind chime. I haven't won that trophy yet. Sooner or later, it's just a matter of time. Apart from you, Who else can step into the ring of the martial competition in the first year of their awakening? Even the defender of the Prism City. Carwin's voice gradually trailed off. Even though Fei Yuhan looked like she was listening, the faint smile on her face made him feel as though he was being ignored. It was as though she was just being polite, but in reality, she was not interested in what he was saying and did not want to continue the conversation any further. He suddenly realized that Fei Yuhan's "thank you" actually meant that the conversation was over. The latter part of the explanation was just for the sake of the organizer, the Clover Group, but it was only enough for him to say a few more words. Thinking of this, Carwin could not help but feel angry. He, who was sought after everywhere he went, had never been treated like this. However, just as his anger rose, Carwin forcibly suppressed it. The Clover Group could not afford to offend the Martialist Association. It was closely related to the national government and various industries. Otherwise, his father would not have spent so much money to befriend these people. He forced a smile, turned around, and left the VIP area. Of course, this slight change in his expression did not escape Fei Yuhan's eyes. However, she did not care about what these ordinary people thought. In the face of the erosion, wealth and power were of limited importance. The only thing they could rely on was their own strength. She looked in the direction of Roland again. She had agreed to attend the banquet because she was following her master's instructions. She did not know why she would waste her precious training time to attend such a social event. It was not until the appearance of that man that her attention was drawn. When the Awaken's heart of nature reached a certain level, they would be able to roughly sense the level of their opponents. This was not due to some special ability, but a comprehensive manifestation of the improvement of their observation skills. Fei Yuhan had reached this level 3 years ago. She also found that as long as they were not in the Prism City, there were only a few people who could surpass her. However, her observation skills were useless in front of that man. His movements, intonation, gaze, and the slight trembling of his skin were no different from that of an ordinary person. The only thing that she could not sense was the fluctuation of the heart of nature. Without this, she would not be able to judge. It would not be strange if the man was just an ordinary person. However, judging from the waiter's hospitality, he was a martialist. Fei Yuhan went to find Carmen. Although she could check the ranking information herself, she preferred to let others handle the trivial matters. As long as she gave them a simple order, they would do their best to complete the task and usually do it better. Then, she heard the name Roland from Carmen's mouth. All her doubts were solved. A week ago, Fei Yuhan learned from her master that a new hunter had been born in the Prism City. He was a martialist with a hunting license. This was not surprising. In order to fight against the evil fallen evils, the martialists had to be given the power to go beyond their limits. This way, they could eliminate their enemies more efficiently. Generally speaking, there were not many people who could become hunters. The few that she knew were seniors who could be called out by their names. However, the hunting license this time was given to a new member who had just joined the association not long ago. If the identity of a hunter had not been classified as top secret by the association, it would have caused a huge uproar. The association usually regarded the holder of the hunting license and the champion of the martial arts tournament as martial artists of the same level. Sometimes, the former's status was even higher. The award this time also meant that someone had picked up the league championship trophy as soon as he awakened. What an incredible thing! If that was the case, it was not worth mentioning that she had made it to the finals 2 times in a row. The name of the hunter was Roland. Fei Yuhan stretched out her right hand expressionlessly and clenched it into a fist. As a disciple of an old guard, she had heard about the conflict between the new and the old factions. One of the most controversial and unanswered questions was, which kind of martialist was stronger? Was it a fighter who walked on the edge of death and used all means to fight against the fallen evils, or was it a fighter who honed his skills every day and competed fairly with different opponents in the same arena? The former was more of a test of one's ability, but it was difficult to fight against the fallen evils even once in several months. For many people, their first battle was their last. Although the latter could spend a lot of time on cultivation, the rules set out for safety reasons not only limited the martialists' performance, but also formed habits in their thoughts and actions. When encountering a relentless opponent, it was easy to get flustered. There were many supporters of the two theories, but it was difficult to find an answer through practice. Now, there seemed to be a standard to measure it. Roland, who had never participated in a martial arts contest and had been fighting fallen evils since his awakening, undoubtedly belonged to the old faction. Fei Yuhan, on the other hand, belonged to the new faction. This was probably why her master had asked her to attend this banquet. As a fellow member of the association and the representative of the two factions, it was always good to get acquainted with her. Unfortunately, Fei Yuhan had no interest in the conflict of ideas. She did not even consider herself a new faction. If her master had not strictly forbidden her to deal with the erosion alone, she would have fought against a few fallen evils. Just like Roland. From the beginning to the end, she only cared about who was stronger. Fortunately, Roland did not disappoint her. If it were any other martialist in the hall, Fei Yuhan would have simulated the outcome of different battles in her mind. Regardless of whether she attacked first or was attacked first, she would be able to estimate her chances of winning. However, she could not determine Roland's level, so she could not simulate the battle. In other words, the two were still tied. Fei Yuhan slightly raised the corner of her mouth. This banquet would not be so boring after all. Moreover, she had also heard some interesting conversations from the three girls who were traveling with them. For example, Dream World. For example, Your Majesty. Is this some kind of novel game? But looking at the girls' expressions, it doesn't seem to be some kind of vulgar roleplay. If I have the chance, I can ask him face to face. Fei Yuhan retracted her gaze and silently committed these questions to memory. After plundering every table, Roland finally found the person he was looking for. Chapter 1149. That man is. Dawnan mumbled while stuffing a pastry into her mouth. Yes, he's the same as the photo I saw in the newspaper. Roland nodded slightly. He had done his homework before coming here and had a basic understanding of the Clover Group. It was Guard, a member of the board of directors of the Clover Group and the president of the construction department. He ranked fifth in the family and was also Garcia's father. He had thought that he would see Wimbledon 3, but it turned out that Zero did not devour the poor king of Greycastle. At the same time, he also confirmed that the residents in the Soul Building had been completely accepted by the dream world and formed a self-consistent set of memories and interpersonal relationships. As for whether Garcia or Guard came first, whether the Clover Group was created based on Garcia's existence, or whether Garcia was randomly selected into the Clover Group's network, it was impossible to know. If he did not have all the memories of the other world, he would probably treat everything here as real. Although the dream world was evolving in a direction that he did not understand, at least the foundation of the world was still based on his memories. Therefore, there was a sense of disharmony everywhere. This, on the contrary, made Roland feel a little relieved. The elements that had been forcibly pieced together were constantly reminding him that he was in a dream. For example, Garcia's surname was Wimbledon, but in this world, her surname was Guard. Such small changes could be seen everywhere. If Cobb in the movie Inception needed a personal item as a totem to distinguish whether the world he was in was a dream or not, Guard would not be so confused. Guard's speech was nothing more than to thank the martialists for their attendance and support. In the end, he also mentioned his daughter, who had severed ties with him. As Garcia had guessed, Guard's tone was full of regret for his daughter's absence, and he expressed his willingness to have a talk with her at any time. There was another round of applause from the audience, and the cameras in the reporters' hands flashed at the perfect time. Only Roland sneered inwardly. After all, as long as he gave up the renovation plan of the apartment or gave her sufficient compensation, Garcia would not have made a fuss with him. After the speech, it was time for a toast. Roland had been waiting for this moment. Let's go. We'll come back later. He gestured to the witch, picked up a glass of champagne, and walked toward Guard. Mr. He, thank you for coming tonight. I'll need your support for the green space project in the future. You're flattering me. We've been working together for so long. Why are you still being so polite? Miss Yuhan, are you satisfied with the new dojo built by 3 Leaves in the Southern District? I've never been there. Ah. Ha, you will definitely be able to stand on it this year. When Guard walked out of the noisy crowd after toasting the guests in the front row, Roland stepped in front of him and blocked his way. You are. The other party was visibly taken aback. Roland, Garcia's representative, he answered straightforwardly. Oh, it's you. Nice to meet you. Guard's expression quickly returned to normal. He turned around and picked up a glass of wine from the waiter. Those who can awaken the force of nature are all born lucky. I really envy you young and promising people. Roland clinked glasses with him but did not drink the champagne. I have something to talk to you in private. Roland's words were somewhat rude. In terms of age, Roland was obviously an elder, and in terms of social status, a director of a large corporation was not much lower than a celebrity martial artist, not to mention a newcomer like Roland who had just entered the industry. Guard could not help but frown. Sorry, I have other guests to entertain. Garcia asked me to come to you. Don't you want to know how your daughter is doing? Roland raised his voice slightly. From the corner of his eye, he saw that some reporters had noticed what was going on. He knew that Guard would definitely agree. Otherwise, he would not be able to maintain his image of caring about his daughter. All right. Guard chose to give in. If it's not too long. Of course, it won't take you long. Roland smiled. There was such a private VIP room in the banquet hall. After the attendants left, only Guard, his secretary, and Roland were left in the room. Is it okay to keep him here? Roland glanced at the old secretary. What I'm about to say involves your interests. Of course. He's a member of my family and has been with me for decades, Guard said in a low voice. Guard said in a deep voice, but are you sure you want to talk to these 3 beautiful, little girls? This is not an amusement park. Now that there was no need to pretend, the secretary looked obviously impatient, and his tone was no longer as polite as before. I see, Roland thought. Considering that he had the force of nature, the secretary would definitely be on guard. Although the man was old, judging from his movements and standing position, he was most likely an awakened as well. Because what I want to talk about is about these 3 girls. Roland shrugged. To make a long story short, it's a deal. They're unregistered residents, and I need you to register them as legal residents and arrange for them to study in a good high school. After a moment of silence, Guard said, Is this what you want to talk to me about? If Roland was an ordinary person, his first reaction would be, Are you King kidding me? His second reaction would be to turn hostile and leave. The fact that he could still control his temper showed that he was a good businessman. That's right, Roland said confidently. It shouldn't be a problem for the Clover Group. You said it's a deal. What can you give me in return? Do you want me to stand up against Garcia, or do you want her to give up fighting against the group and give up the tube-shaped building for the new project? I'm her friend. How could I do such a thing? In fact, after discovering the secret of the memory fragments, the tube-shaped building had become the object that Roland was determined to protect. Any construction team that wanted to demolish the building would have to face the attacks of 300 tequila witches. For example, it was a piece of cake for them to tear down the tracks of an excavator overnight, or to make the construction site haunted. Oh, friends. Guard sneered. Then we have nothing to talk about. Not necessarily. Roland took out the hunting license from his pocket and waved it in front of Guard. This is. Guard's expression changed instantly. He quickly turned to look at the old secretary. The secretary stared at the license for a long time and nodded slowly. It's real. How did you get this? That's a secret of the association. You have no right to know, Roland interrupted Guard. After all, even he did not know how the association carried out the application, verification, and issuance of the license. You just need to understand what it means. Guard stared at him for a long time. He took out a cigar from his pocket and seemed to want to smoke it. After fiddling with it for a long time, he finally put it away. It seems that my daughter has met someone extraordinary. But Mr. Roland, the Martialist Association is a law-abiding organization. Do you think I'm threatening you? Roland sighed deliberately. As I said before, this is a deal. Then what you mean is? There will always be some indescribable obstacles when it comes to business. It's easier to deal with those in the open, but it's not so easy to deal with those in the dark. Am I right? Roland held up a finger. A chance to solve the problem. That's the price I'm offering. But not just anyone. First, the target must be the criminal. Second, the target must not be in the open. Finally, the target must be a threat to you. I have a way to verify the above 3 points, so don't take any chances. In this way, the association will not care too much about this matter. Of course, it's best if the higher-ups know nothing about it. To put it simply, it was a gangster leader. Such a person usually had a large number of subordinate gangs under his control. Normally, it would take a long time to collect evidence, set up an ambush, arrest, and trial, during which the company might suffer a huge loss. It would be much easier to solve the problem by violence. Judging from the look in Guard's eyes, Roland knew that he must have encountered several similar cases. Guard hesitated for a moment. Mr. Roland, if you're serious, then the value of the 3 accounts is not equal. Roland could not help but chuckle. Garcia was right. Don't worry, my father is not an unreasonable person. When it comes to business, especially transactions, the only thing he cares about is his own interests. Now, he knew when to advance and when to retreat. You can take it as a deposit to reach an agreement. The 3 people with me are just the first batch. There should be about 300 people in total. 300. Illegal accounts? Guard said hesitantly. The police will definitely notice. Take your time. I don't want you to complete it in a short time. 1 year, 2 years, or even several years won't be a problem. After all, this agreement is valid for a long time. According to Celine, not everyone could concentrate on studying. For people like Elena and Phyllis, it would be better for them to follow him to rob fallen evils to earn a living. In that case, I might be able to do it. Then let's have a pleasant cooperation. After the old secretary took photos of the witches, the deal was sealed. Although it would not write down any written contract, Roland knew that it would not easily break its promise. When he was about to leave the room with the 3 witches, guards suddenly stopped him. Wait. Anything else? Roland turned around. How's my daughter, Garcia, doing? Guard hesitated for a moment before he asked. I've called her many times, but she didn't answer. Don't worry, she's having a good time, Roland replied. Looking at the closed door, Guard finally lit a cigar. After a long while, he asked in a low voice, is this man really just an ordinary person? I have the same feeling. The silent secretary nodded. That kind of high and mighty attitude doesn't seem to be faked. Ordinary people usually showed timidity, flattery, arrogance, and pretended to be tough in front of him. This was caused by the gap in age, wealth, and social status. The force of nature could not change a person's temperament, especially for a newly awakened person like Roland. However, Guard did not see any discomfort in Roland. Instead, Roland looked natural, relaxed, and looked down on him as if he had been in this situation countless times. But how could this be possible? Guard was about the same age as Garcia, in his 20s. For the first time, Guard found that he could not see through a person at all. You shouldn't have made such a deal, Saint Miron muttered after leaving the cubicle. After leaving the cubicle, Saint Miron muttered, you are the king of 2 worlds. The way he looked at you was too rude. If Lady Alethea was here, she would have put her sword to his neck, Dodo echoed. Since he's the king, he should do whatever he wants, Donnan objected. Donnan objected. Just like Lady Alice, she doesn't care about other people's opinions. Roland did not know whether to laugh or cry when he heard these words coming out of the mouth of the little girl, who looked so different from him. Well, it's because my minister can't enter the dream world. And as I said, don't call me your majesty. Yes, Brother Roland, the three witches immediately corrected themselves. By the way, are we going back now? Donnan looked at the buffet at the back of the hall and unconsciously licked her lips. The banquet will probably last until late at night, but it's not good to keep the other witches waiting for too long. Roland looked up at the darkening sky with amusement. Let's eat for half an hour and leave at 8 o'clock sharp. Yes, Your Majesty. The three witches looked at each other and excitedly ran to the table. They really look like underage children, Roland could not help sighing in his heart. He followed them slowly and picked up the glass of champagne that he had not touched. When he was about to drink it, he remembered that he had driven here, so he had no choice but to put it down reluctantly. Just as he raised it up and put it down, the pale golden champagne suddenly changed. A bright red undercurrent appeared out of thin air, like ink dripping into a glass, spreading out in circles along the swirling wine, but it did not dye the champagne the same red color. Instead, it gradually condensed into a line of distorted text, appearing extremely abrupt and strange. Don't forget our agreement. It was a short sentence, but it made Roland break out in a cold sweat. He subconsciously wanted to throw the glass away, but he forcibly suppressed his impulse the moment the glass left his hand. He pulled it back so hard that it even cracked the leg of the glass. Chapter 1150. Roland felt an indescribable chill enveloping his body. As expected, he was being watched by someone in this supposedly illusory dream world. He raised his head and quickly scanned the people around him. Who? A waiter? An entrepreneur? An awakened? The banquet hall was still bustling with people enjoying the party. The only abnormal person seemed to be Roland himself. Roland took a deep breath and slowly calmed his racing heart. The agreement could not be referring to anything else. The messenger of the message should be the same person who left the note in the book. Rose Café, number 302. There was no doubt that someone wanted to see him. This kind of means was beyond the scope of the force of nature. Martialists were not witches, and they were not good at all kinds of abilities. The awakened ones had stronger strength, speed, and 5 senses. When they practiced to a certain extent, they could also release their cyclones, which were similar to spells. But generally speaking, they were more inclined to the combat type. Moreover, he had not sensed any fluctuation of the force of nature around him. In other words, the crafty trick that made the words appear was probably from a more advanced power. The dream world was constantly evolving into an unknown realm, which might have something to do with this. I'm really being watched by an NPC, Roland muttered self-deprecatingly. As a world where time would completely stop when he was awake, it was really difficult for him to relate to reality. Except for the foreign witches and the defeated people who had been devoured by Zero, he subconsciously thought that the rest of the people in the dream world should be imaginary. No matter how real they were, they lacked the key self. But now, a fabricator noticed his difference and took the initiative to send him a message. When did it start? Was it when he borrowed the internal books of the association from Garcia, or when he found in the reflection church that the figure from 800 years ago was exactly the same as Lon in the dream world? Or was it earlier than that, like the moment when Zero pulled him into the soul battlefield? He could not think of an answer. Even if he knew, it would be meaningless. The most important thing was what the other party wanted to say. Brother Roland? Donnan's voice interrupted his thoughts. What happened? No, nothing. Roland snapped back to reality and shook his head with a smile. I'll be right there. After confirming that there was nothing wrong with the wine glass, he placed it on the nearest table and walked towards the witches. This tastes so smooth and tender. Even if you have to wait, you should give it a try. Saint Miran handed him a skewer of freshly grilled foie gras, and the enticing aroma of the grease wafted over. Roland followed her gaze and couldn't help but cover his face. He saw the three witches standing guard in front of the three tables that needed to be freshly cooked, taking all the food that the chef had just cooked into their hands. They had the posture of, "This place has already been occupied by me." The surrounding men were still fine. None of them would snatch food from the hands of the young ladies, but the ladies were rather disgruntled. With his excellent hearing, he heard some intermittent whispers coming from the surroundings. "Who brought them here? They're so cute, but why do they look like they've never eaten anything good? Look at their clothes and shoes. Did they sneak in? TSK, they look like they've been starving for hundreds of years." After hearing these complaints, Roland wanted to tell them to restrain themselves, but he swallowed his words and turned around to glare at the group of people who were gossiping behind him. "Sorry, they really haven't tasted food for hundreds of years. Don't forget to bring some for your family." "Oh." Biting into the foie gras skewer handed to him by the witches, Roland resumed his previous train of thought. Since the other party had such an ability, why didn't they talk to him face to face? Why did they have to make it so awkward and make it seem like a riddle? Were they afraid of scaring him, or did they lack some kind of opportunity? If it was the former, the words would appear in the wine without warning. If it were someone with a weak heart, he would have died immediately. As for the latter, his mind involuntarily recalled the contents of the note. "The day the divine will appears, the appointed time to meet." Roland silently repeated it several times in his heart. Suddenly, he could not help but gasp. Could it be? Was the other party referring to the day the bloody moon appeared in the real world? The appearance of the bloody moon also meant the beginning of the battle of divine will. Only at this time could the messenger talk to him. But how did the people in the dream world know what was happening in the other world? As long as he did not enter the dream world, this world would always be in a frozen state. What made him speechless was that even if the opportunity was as he had guessed, the location was still a mystery. Who knew which corner of the city the Rose Café was located in? Couldn't they have chosen a tube-shaped apartment or a well-known landmark as the meeting place? Just as Roland was silently cursing, two middle-aged men who looked like bosses walked past him. "I heard that your golf course is about to start construction. It was approved a while ago and cost me a lot of money. Why, President Gao, are you interested?" "Not really. I don't usually exercise. I'm more interested in the master you found. I heard that you spent more than 3 million on him. I had no choice but to ask for good luck. People in our line of work only hope that everything goes smoothly. We can earn more money after we spend it. It's said that the names he sets are very effective." "What's the last name?" "The Rhine Green Field. It's just across the river from the Clover Group's Green Field project." "Ha ha ha. That's quite a coincidence." Roland could not help but be slightly stunned. He did not hear what the two men said after that. Names can be chosen by oneself. He had been secretly asking the witches to look for the Rose Café, but he had neglected this point. What if he opened a cafe and named it Rose? If the other party really wanted to contact him, they should not have chosen a place that he had never heard of. On the other hand, since the other party could directly display the words in the wine glass in his hand, it should not be difficult for them to find out that he opened a cafe. He had already rented the second floor of the warehouse. As long as he rented the 2 shops next door, he would have enough space to set up the cafe. He could even go one step further. Other than the bar counter, tables, chairs, and other necessary facilities, he could just set up a private room and set the nameplate as 302. With the addition of the tequila witches, he could say that he had both waiters and customers. Who said that a cafe could not sell its own food? After calculating the funds on hand, Roland quickly made a decision. After Roland left the banquet hall, Fei Yuhan walked to the table at the back and picked up the glass of champagne. She saw with her own eyes that the association's new hunter through the glass of champagne with a shocked expression, but at the last moment, he caught it back. It was as if he was not holding champagne, but a piece of burning charcoal. For a moment, she even saw a trace of panic on his face. What could cause a hunter to panic? She could not imagine it. For people like him who constantly walked on the edge of life and death, even death would not cause him to panic. Not to mention a cup of ordinary wine. But Fei Yuhan knew that it was not an illusion. There were obvious cracks on the bottom of the glass, a sign that he had lost control of his strength. Generally speaking, only a newcomer who had just awakened the force of nature would make such a mistake. From this, it could be inferred that what he saw was not ordinary. Fei Yuhan lifted the glass and gently sniffed it, but did not find any residual smell. Roland had not drunk this glass of champagne, which meant that the thing that surprised him had nothing to do with the wine. She slowly drank the wine in the glass and confirmed her judgment. It was just ordinary wine. Compared to the childish conversation between Roland and the three girls, such as, King of the Two Worlds, and, My Minister, she was more concerned about his reaction when he was caught off guard. Only when he inadvertently revealed his actions could he not lie. Something must have happened at that time. Chapter 1151. The next morning, when Roland walked out of his bedroom and into the castle hall, the tequila witches, who had just disconnected, raised their elbows to greet him with the highest etiquette of the Union. Good morning, Your Majesty. Thank you for your hospitality. Last night was the best experience I've had in a century. I'll look forward to my next reunion with the Dreamland in the final battle. What happened last night? Anna asked curiously after the gods' punishment witches left the castle with happy and contented faces. A sumptuous, high-end banquet, Roland said with a smile. With Donnan's help, Dodo had gobbled up nearly half of the food on the table. Fortunately, a banquet of this scale would not care about how much the guests had eaten. Even if the food was thrown away, it would be immediately refilled. If it had been an ordinary buffet, the waiters would have long been eyeing the food. After all, according to the consumption rate of the invisible pocket, even 10 mouths would not be enough. You're making me hungry. Anna's stomach rumbled. When can I eat those things? Looking at her blue eyes full of expectation, Roland could not help but reach out to touch her head. In a few years, you'll definitely be able to eat. High-end delicacies were mainly reflected in the ingredients. Modern people could enjoy delicacies from all over the world because of the developed transportation network. If they wanted to eat fresh sea urchins from the port of Clearwater in Neverwinter, they would have to travel at least 2 or 3 times faster on the inland river. Of course, even if they could not meet the requirements in a short time, as long as they could drive the demons out of the fertile plains, they could take the Seagull to various places in Grey Castle for their honeymoon and enjoy the local delicacies. Breakfast was the usual eggs, bread, and a cup of chaos drink. For Roland, who had also eaten and drunk in the Dreamland, it was not very tempting. But when he remembered that the tequila witches still had to rely on high-heat dry food to replenish their energy consumption, he ate everything on the plate. After breakfast, Anna quickly said goodbye to him and set off for the North Slope Research Laboratory. Whether in Neverwinter or at the front, she rarely had free time. In fact, most of the members of the Witch Union were the same. Returning to the French window in his office, he could see familiar figures passing by from time to time in the vestibule. The witches had completely integrated into the city and were building the future they wanted together with the ordinary people. At this moment, Nightingale pushed open the door and walked in. A letter from the garrison at Festive Harbor. She placed a thick paper bag on the desk. I saw Sean holding this when I was downstairs, so I brought it over. So heavy. Roland picked up the paper cutter. It should have been sent by sea. Nightingale walked behind him and took out a bag of dried fish from the drawer. I've checked it, and I didn't find anything strange. Roland opened the package and poured out its contents. Other than the letter and a stack of sketches, there were also a few sealed bags of stones. From the looks of it, it was basically similar to the sample that Rex presented previously. Roland quickly skimmed through the contents of the letter and could not help but frown. The report from the First Army had shocked him. The so-called ancient ruins were not just a small area like the underwater cave, but a normal one that covered every corner of the sea. Upon receiving his order, the garrison at Festive Harbor immediately took action. Following the instructions of Simbadi, they buried a large number of explosives above the sea cave and directly blew up the entire cave. The enraged giant armored scorpion broke out of the ground and was surrounded by several machine gun squads and mortar squads. It was shot into a hornet's nest before it could crawl out more than 10 steps. This result was not surprising. What really surprised people was the subsequent cleanup and exploration work. According to the survey by the engineering team, the explosives had caused the ground within a radius of hundreds of meters to sink to different depths, which was far more than the effect of the explosives. From the attached sketches, Roland saw that the huge sand surface formed a slippery slope, as if the whole earth had collapsed. After that, the First Army carried out several more explosions and organized people to move sand and dig holes. Finally, they found 16 exploration sites near the Festive Harbor where the Matchstick Man's relic could be found. If they were connected in a line, the area covered by the Matchstick Man's relic was large enough to contain 7 or 8 harbors. Due to the limited manpower, the Sand Nation could only clean up 3 cave-ins in a month. However, the results were surprisingly similar. The bottom of the desert was covered by a stone tablet wall that was 5 to 10 meters thick, and in the places that were not covered by the stone tablets, there were clusters of sharp green grass. After looking through the lifelike sketches, Roland could not help but fall silent. First of all, he had to admit that this was excellent news. If the stone tablets were used as resources for mining, the more the better. Now that the tracer bullets had been finalized, with this news, the large-scale production was guaranteed. Moreover, this strange piezoelectric silicide must have more than one use. Roland could think of pressure gauges, lighters, quartz clocks, and so on. There was also the imitation of the magic ceremony cube. Although the exploration results showed that the number of the radioactive clan's relic was far less than the Matchstick Man's, it was not a big problem to gather a bunch of magic cubes. For example, the samples sent back this time could almost meet Celine's research needs. However, the content hidden in the report was chilling. There were so many stone tablets near the Festive Harbor. How many stone tablets would there be in the Endless Cape? If they were the remains of silicon-based creatures, the greater the number, the more tragic the war was. Moreover, the soil structure of the 3 cave-ins was almost the same, indicating that they were formed at the same time. An incredible picture gradually formed in Roland's mind. Perhaps the desertification of the southernmost region was not caused by the lack of water, and the Silver Stream was not an underground river from the beginning. It used to be lush and green, no different from other places on the continent. Until the war spread to this place. An astonishing number of Matchstick Men were killed by the radioactive clan. Their bodies were spread all over the ground. This could be confirmed by the murals in the Temple of the Cursed, where the radioactive clan finally seized the relics of the gods and won the war. The key was that after the Battle of Divine Will, the bodies of silicon-based creatures would not decay as quickly as the bodies of carbon-based creatures. Instead, they would become nutrients for the soil and return to the biosphere. Layers of the bodies were piled up on the grass. The thickness of the bodies might be several stories higher than that of a building. The river was blocked, the forest was crushed, and most plants lost their living space. Only vines could climb up through the cracks and absorb the precious sunlight. The ecology of the southernmost region was destroyed. But nature was always tolerant. Whether organic or inorganic, they would eventually become part of the world. Hundreds of years later, the top layer of the bodies gradually weathered and became sand, which then fell down layer by layer. The sand moved with the wind until all the holes were filled up. During this process, the vines growing in the cracks died one after another. Only in the open space that was not covered by the Matchstick Men survived. The large number of plants resisted the erosion of the sand and turned the gravel into soil again. Hundreds or even thousands of years passed. The countless bodies on the top layer gradually piled up into a desert. They isolated the bodies on the bottom layer from the sea wind and piled up the shoreline more than 10 meters high. The flowing effect of the sand dune kept the pressure on the bottom layer constantly changing. The steels glowed and extinguished again and again. This extremely long alternation could not guarantee the diversity of plants, but it allowed some grasses with a long growth cycle to survive. The open space became the Silver Stream oasis and nurtured the Irons and people of the Majin clan. In other words, the current Iron Sand City and the festive harbor were built on weathered corpses. This scene made Roland shudder. He even hoped that he had guessed the wrong direction. If the Battle of Divine Will really had no end, how many people would be sacrificed in this world? Under the earth, in the depths of the sea. Chapter 1152. Hey! Roland. Nightingale's voice pulled him back to reality. Are you okay? What's wrong with me? Roland cleared his throat. You're staring at the blueprint in a daze, and you don't look good. Is there any bad news on it? No, maybe I'm just overthinking it. Roland shook his head and briefly explained his speculation. If this is really the world, then it's really hopeless. A problem that could not be ignored was that thousands of years was a very short period of time for life. When the radiation people and the matchstick people were fighting each other, where were the humans? Where were the demons? If the Battle of Divine Will was endless, then what about the civilizations that won the Divine Will? No matter how tragic the war was, there would always be a winner. But why were they all so missing? At this thought, Roland suddenly felt that the road ahead was much more difficult. I see. Nightingale said thoughtfully. But even if you're right, I think there's still a solution. Roland looked at her in surprise. What solution? First of all, I'm not Anna, so I can't say anything. It's just my personal opinion. Don't laugh, understand? I promise I won't laugh. Nightingale stuffed a piece of dried fish into her mouth. First of all, you have to admit that this is not a problem that can be solved in 1 or 2 generations, right? So the most important thing is to pass on the news until the time is right. Well, that makes sense. Roland nodded. And then? There's no then. Ah. He was a little surprised. Because it has nothing to do with us. Nightingale said matter-of-factly, our lifespan is limited. It's not easy to complete the responsibility of this life. Why worry about the future? As for what those people do and whether they succeed or not, it's their responsibility. It's meaningless even if you think about it until your hair turns white. He could not help but grin. Is this comfort? But no matter what, such a simple and straightforward way of thinking was indeed Nightingale's style. Are you going to laugh at my short-sightedness? Nightingale narrowed her eyes. No. Roland immediately closed his mouth. You've thought it through. That's more like it. She raised her head and said proudly, and if you're worried that the latecomers aren't capable enough and can't shoulder this responsibility, you can always share it with the other clans. Share? What should I do? Building ruins to record the truth of the Battle of Divine Will, this is also a way to transmit information. Didn't you discover the existence of the radiation race and the stick man from the murals in the Temple of the Cursed? Build a few sturdy underground fortresses around Grey Castle and engrave the paintings on the walls to warn the other civilizations that are participating in the war. If enough time passes, I think there will be 1 or 2 races that can wait until the time is right. Roland couldn't help but be startled. Not only could Nightingale's words not be said to be short, they could even be said to be extremely profound. Even if the human race was completely annihilated in the war that determined its fate, it would not be the same as withdrawing from the stage. By using this method to transmit information, as long as there was a winner that jumped out of the framework, the human civilization would definitely be recorded in the history books. Perhaps even she herself didn't realize the significance of this method. After a while, Roland shook his head with a smile and poured her a cup of chaos drink. It's good that you can think of this with your brain. You can omit the first half of the sentence. Although Nightingale said so, she still took the cup without hesitation. Indeed, that was the last and most helpless method. Roland thought to himself. However, if possible, he would prefer humans to be the recorder rather than the symbol to be recorded. After calling Sean and handing him the stone pieces in the bag, Roland threw himself into the day's work. In the afternoon, the person he had been waiting for came to the castle. It was Camilla Derry, the butler of Sleeping Island. Strangely, she did not travel with Tilly, and there was no sign that she had taken care of herself. She still looked travel-worn. This meant that she probably went straight to the castle as soon as she got off the ship and did not even go to the sleeping spell. A bad feeling rose in Roland's heart. You've just arrived in Neverwinter. He made a cup of tea for Camilla. Thank you. How was Thunder's expedition? Camilla drank the tea in one gulp and almost choked. Ahem, something happened to the Shadow Islands. Joan, she disappeared. Disappeared? Roland's heart sank. He could not help but exchange a look with Nightingale. Tell me what happened. That's about it. Camilla spent half an hour to tell him the whole story. We waited outside the sea for 2 days, but Joan didn't come back. Thunder said that you were the only one who could possibly know what had happened to Joan underwater. That distorted scene, that floating pillar island. Can it really exist in the real world? How could such a thing happen? Roland could not help rubbing his forehead. The more he learned about the world, the more he felt it was strange. He had thought that the dream was full of incongruities, but now it seemed that the reality was not much better. The elongated stone pillars and fish did not seem to be caused by external forces. The most obvious evidence was that Camilla saw Joan's fingers suddenly lengthen before she was pulled into the deep sea. If she had been pulled out by force, the chief butler, who was in the state of mind resonance, would have felt unbearable pain. But in fact, neither Joan nor Camilla felt any physical discomfort. The only thing he could think of was that the space had been distorted. Although it sounded strange and he had no evidence, he knew he had to say something. Camilla did not go to Tilly first, nor did she wait for her fatigue to recover before reporting to him, because she could not wait to know Joan's safety. Judging from her bloodshot eyes, Roland guessed that she might not have had a good sleep on the way. Camilla was so worried that she probably blamed herself as well. That was to say, even if it was nonsense, he had to come up with something. Fortunately, with the example of the sea lean, which was perpendicular to the sea surface, he could not exaggerate too much. Roland rubbed his forehead and thought for a long time before saying, I think Thunder made the right decision. Camilla immediately raised her head. You also think that Joan is still alive? Yes, and she might have gone to the east of the sea lean. In the blink of an eye, she traveled thousands of miles. Is this really possible? I'm just guessing. First of all, I'm sure that the water level of the shadow waters has indeed dropped, right? This change can even affect the ebb and flow of the fjord islands. The amount of water must be astonishing. So, where did the falling water go? Roland picked up a quill and drew a circle on the paper. I guess it went to the east of the sea lean. Camilla thought for a moment. Thunder seemed to have said that the water near the sea lean does flow to the west. Because if it's not replenished, the swirling sea will dry up after 2 or 3 times of low tide. Roland then drew a second circle. The 2 circles were about a palm apart. The problem is that if the water is moved from one place to the other and then poured out, the water should come in waves. But the fact is that the water is constantly moving. To achieve this, we have to pass through the 2 circles in an instant. So, what's the fastest way? Camilla stretched out her hand uncertainly and gestured between the 2 circles. Straight? She asked. In theory, yes. Roland added a straight line between the 2 circles. But there's another possibility. Then he folded the paper so that the 2 circles overlapped. In this way, we can reach the destination in an instant. Camilla gasped. How is this possible? It's indeed beyond common sense. But if it's caused by magic power, it can't be measured by common sense. For example, Nightingale can also teleport over short distances and pass through obstacles that ordinary people can't. The effect is similar to this. The chief butler fell silent. Also, although it's just a hypothesis, the phenomenon you mentioned is very intriguing. Roland inserted the tip of the quill into the circle. For example, this quill went from the front to the back in the blink of an eye, but it actually completed the journey in a straight line. In other words, from the outside, it looks like the fish has traveled thousands of miles in less than a breath. What do you think we'll see? Camilla murmured, shrink, small. That's right. The rule of big near and small far is still in effect. So I think it's not that the fish has been stretched, but that its body is thousands of miles away from you, so it naturally looks thin and long. Phew. She let out a long sigh and finally looked relaxed. If there's also a sea outside the circle, Joan should be able to survive. Roland nodded. Thank you. Camilla seemed to want to say something more, but her body suddenly tilted and she fell to the ground. Nightingale caught her in time. She's probably just exhausted. Take her to the witch building to rest. I'll send someone to inform Tilly. Chapter 1153. When the sun gradually disappeared between the mountains, the whole plain was dyed with a layer of red clouds. This red was different from the red of the red mist. It was pure and clear. Whenever this happened, Osrook liked to stay high up and feel the distance between himself and the sky. Although he could fly higher, the disturbance of magic power would not only break the silence, but the dome that he could never touch would also increase the sense of distance. On the contrary, when he sat quietly, the golden clouds and the reddish-purple sky seemed only a step away from him. This was not a common experience. Most of the time, the top of his head was covered by the floating red mist. Although it made Osrook feel very comfortable, it also separated him from the sky by a thick layer of gauze. He was probably one of the few individuals that did not like to stay in the birth tower. But Osrook did not think that he was an anomaly. He was just more eager to embrace the source of magic power than others. That's right, the source came from the sky. Humans called it the Crimson Moon, which was quite appropriate. It was said that after obtaining all the inheritances, the race would welcome the final upgrade, the passage between heaven and earth would open and accept them into the sky. Without a doubt, the sky was a place that was vaster than the current world. Perhaps it was also the residence of God. At that time, they would be 100 times stronger than they were now, and their bodies would become immortal because of the surging magic power. As for this rumor, Osrook did not fully believe it. He had tried to use his own strength to fly into the deep sky. Unfortunately, when he could not replenish the red mist, he found that after reaching a certain height, he would encounter all kinds of obstacles, such as a sudden drop in temperature, freezing of his armor, difficulty in blood flow, difficulty in breathing, and so on. If he used magic power to resist the discomfort, the breathing tank on his back would soon be exhausted. The highest he flew was once, and he almost died on the spot. But it was also that attempt that deepened his desire for the sky. Because in the dark purple sky, he did see something, but when he thought about it later, it was difficult to describe. If he had to describe it, it was probably like a flash of scales. This also meant that the rumor was not groundless. At that time, he also heard a faint call. It sounded like a whisper, but also like a low murmur that echoed directly in his mind. Osrook knew that this was a sign that the realm of mind was drawing closer to him. Unfortunately, it was still a little bit away from the next level. Those who could open the gate of the two realms could be called great monarchs. Just as it closed its eyes to enjoy the warmth of the afterglow and the night breeze, it heard footsteps behind it. Sir Osrook, all the preparations have been completed. The person making the report was its junior guard. Very good, Osrook said without turning his head. Continue to monitor them. Yes. After the guard responded, he did not leave immediately. Instead, he said hesitantly, "But will those bugs really act according to our plan? They should have already fully understood your abilities. In order to set up this trap, we have paid a huge price. If His Excellency Sky Lord were to find out." What you said isn't unreasonable, but I think it's worth it." Osruk opened his eyes and looked towards the south. Now that he was standing on the horn, he could already faintly see the black trail. In the 6 months of probing, many primal demons had died in front of the human camp, but they had never shaken the enemy's advance. The trail was like a root, growing slowly but tenaciously. This was the first time in his memory that the humans did not rely on the city wall to fight a head-on battle without being at a disadvantage. Although this method was laughably clumsy, and if it was in an area covered by the red mist, it would have countless ways to make the enemy pay a heavy price. But in this vast plain, it was unexpectedly difficult to deal with. Although the military strength at hand was one of the main reasons, even if the great monarch mobilized more troops for it, it would inevitably suffer heavy losses against the humans who had already gained a firm foothold. It had to strangle this budding army while it was still in its nascent stage. What do you think of the recent battles? Do you feel like it's difficult to move forward? The guard was silent for a moment. That's because we are fighting with our backs to the wall. No, it's the enemy who is forcing us to fight with our backs to the wall. Osruk corrected him. We have also built outposts in an attempt to further expand the supply range of the life floaters, but it didn't work as well as it did 400 years ago. This is because the humans now have a way to attack from a farther distance than the tombstone. Regardless of whether you see the enemy as a bug or not, you have to admit this. In addition, our every move is under the observation of the witches, so we feel like we are running into a wall. He paused, stretched out his right hand towards the black trail, and slowly clenched it into a fist. As long as we don't erect the birth tower, we can't change this situation. Therefore, I'm going to destroy their eyes and cut off their arms before they realize what's going on, so that they won't be able to play the same trick again, even if they have to pay the price of 2 horns. As he spoke, Osruk revealed a trace of a sinister smile, and surging magic power surged out, causing the surrounding air to tremble. He knew that at the end of the black trail, in the camp, someone was watching him. This action had probably alarmed the humans and caused them to be in a mess. "I swear to follow you by your side." Feeling the surging power, the guard bowed his head respectfully. There was one more thing that Osruk did not mention. He felt that he was only a hair's breadth away from the next breakthrough. This battle might be an opportunity. After all, a bloody battle had always been the most effective way to improve. Even after becoming a king, he would not reject such a challenge. If he could cross that hurdle and become a new senior lord, then no matter what the Sky Lord thought, he would not be calculative with him. As for whether the humans would take action, Osruk was not worried. He had long experienced the greed of his opponents. As long as the bait was rich enough, they would not let it go easily. The sun finally set completely, and the last bit of its afterglow dissipated. The sky was completely shrouded in darkness, and there was only a faint starlight and darkness above his head. This scene seemed to overlap with the scene when he was sprinting towards the heavens. That day, he confirmed his desire. And now, he was approaching that goal step by step. What the humans were thinking was probably the same as him. In this competition that would decide one's fate, only the final victor would have the qualifications to reach that never-before-seen domain and come into contact with the origin of magic. He was full of anticipation for the impending battle. Chapter 1154. Just as Nightingale had said, Camilla looked so tired and weak mainly because of her mental anxiety. In just 2 days, she had recovered to her normal state, as if the moment of helplessness and confusion had never existed. Roland heaved a sigh of relief. Camilla's ability was very important for long-range ambushes. Even though the other party's gaze towards him was a little more guarded and distant compared to when they first returned, it made him feel a lot more natural. He knew that Butler was still worried about Joan, but he suppressed his uneasiness for the time being. She had a more important responsibility on her shoulders. Apart from Roland, Tilly, Anna and Nightingale, no other witches, especially Lightning, knew about Joan's disappearance. Roland had heard a lot about the Neverwinter exploration group established by the little girl, and he knew that Joan was a member. Lightning and Maggie had formed the outermost perimeter of the First Army, and they had not left the battlefield for several months. It was not hard to imagine the pressure they were under. Moreover, Lightning had been injured by the Magic Slayer, so they could not afford to make any mistakes. Therefore, it was better to keep this kind of worrisome news a secret. In the following week, he repeatedly traveled between the third border city, the weapon testing ground and the castle's conference room to decide on the final ambush plan. Since the Magic Slayer was much more agile and faster than the devil beasts, it was much more difficult to carry out the ambush plan. Roland had thought that he could finalize the plan in 2 or 3 days, but he ran into a lot of trouble during the simulation. Fortunately, this was a joint project, and with the cooperation of many parties, he finally came up with a feasible plan. A week later, the decision-making meeting was held in the underground hall of the third border city. Alethea was the first to speak. She manipulated the magic core and projected an illusion in front of everyone. The light curtain, which was several meters long, looked like a window hanging in the air, showing the scene behind the ruins of Tequila. Since the illusion was not a real window, they could not poke their head through it, so their field of vision was a little narrow. The 5-colored stone could not be adjusted, so it was difficult to observe the surroundings. However, it happened to be facing the demon's only supply line, which provided a convenient and intuitive reference for planning an ambush route. This blood line runs from northeast to southwest. Almost every day, there would be a team providing red mist to the demons stationed in the ruins. 10 months ago, when Lorgar first discovered the demons and Ashes began to locate them, there were 3 teams. From this, it could be seen that the enemy had lost and the number of troops they had left since Operation Torch began. Since there was only one supply line, the senior demons wouldn't stray too far from it if they planned to retreat. Is there no way to disguise the bloodlines? Vendi was still a little worried. As long as the demons still need the red mist to survive, this is the most reliable information. Although she had answered similar questions many times before, Alethea still explained patiently, they have indeed used the tactic of transporting a large amount of red mist to conceal the direction of the main attack, or carrying a large amount of red mist on their backs to carry out long-range attacks, but they have never compressed the demand for red mist to conceal the movement of the main force, because that would be suicidal. In fact, it's easy to understand, Agatha added. If the demons really have a method that doesn't rely on the red mist, they can bypass the frontline station and directly attack the interior of Greycastle. Whether they attack from the Misty Forest or occupy the Hermes Plateau, they will pose a much greater threat to us. The obelisk made with the help of the gods' stone mine is no longer a stronghold that they have to defend. Seeing that no one had any objections, Alethea continued, the supply team is basically made up of modified siege beasts and a few mad demon guards. They pose no threat to the Special Operations Team and the Seagull, so the interception is mainly to guard against the devil beasts flying in the sky. As for the location, she pointed to Edith, I very much agree with this mortal's judgment. Let her speak. This is the result of the joint efforts of the General Staff and all of you. The Pearl of the Northern Region smiled. Of course, it's also inseparable from the map provided by Lightning and Miss Maggie. Please take a look at the report in your hands. The east side of the bloodline is almost flat, and the forest is very sparse. It's not suitable for the Special Operations Team to hide, but it's an ideal view for the Seagull. The west side is much more complicated. Not only is the terrain undulating, but there's also a small hill. Roland flipped open the report on the table. One of the pages was a simple map. Compared to the high-definition version that Soroya had explored, this map was undoubtedly much simpler. It was probably roughly drawn by Lightning in a very short period of time with Maggie while flying at high speed. Although it couldn't be used for precise tasks such as guiding the march or artillery strikes, it could at least give people a general idea of the situation behind the Tequila. The terrain on this side can only be seen a little through the phantom instrument, so we need to use the map to fill in the gaps. And there are 3 locations that are more suitable for Miss Andrea to launch her shooting formation. From north to south, they are the top of the hill, the forest at the foot of the hill, and a raised foothill. The best place to shoot is the top of the hill, Roland said. Although the hill was not more than 100 meters high and looked more like a lump of earth from afar, it was still the highest point within 1,000 miles. For a sniper, there was nothing more important than vision. Shooting from a high place not only gave them a longer range, but also allowed them to catch the target flying close to the ground. Indeed, Miss Andrea said so too, Edith nodded. But this hill is quite far from the supply line. If the Seagull intercepts the Magic Slayer, the Special Operations team will have to travel a lot longer. Similarly, the top of the hill is not well hidden, and flying devil beasts can easily spot them. If something happens, the Seagull will not be able to rescue them. Most importantly, it's not within the range of the phantom instrument. Roland pondered over the meaning of this sentence. You're worried about the demons? It's the only high point in the area where we can overlook the whole situation. If I were stationed there, I wouldn't be at ease if I didn't take precautions. Although Lightning said that the demons did not seem to be prepared, it's better to be cautious when it comes to a war involving magic power. For example, you set up the sigil of screaming at the source of the Redwater River. It can be used as an early warning even without troops stationed there. And the Special Operations team's trump card is secrecy. If we're exposed, we won't be able to attack. To be honest, in the Union era, the most difficult thing to explain to mortals was magic power. Just then, Alethea's voice came into Roland's mind. Judging from the reactions of the others, it was undoubtedly a private message. The way they think is like they live in another world, and they rarely consider magic power. But this mortal is different. You have a few interesting people under your command. That's because you've never taught them seriously. Geniuses are always the minority. Education is the most effective way to improve the overall strength of a civilization. Roland replied naturally and then looked at Edith. So where did you choose? The jungle at the foot of the hill, Alethea said without hesitation. It has a narrow field of vision, but it's also good for concealment. We can shoot at targets in the air, and we can support Princess Tilly at any time. The foothills are closer and there's no lack of woods to hide in, but it's almost next to the Tequila ruins. If the enemy troops collapse and flee, they'll be easily affected. All in all, the forest in the middle doesn't have the best conditions, but the most balanced one? Roland asked. Chapter 1155. Roland naturally knew what the Pearl of the Northern region was referring to. The development of the god's punishment bullet had encountered many technical problems, such as the caliber of the bullet and the gun. Since the hardness of the god's stone was related to its size, it was necessary to enlarge it as much as possible. However, a larger god's stone would also produce a larger anti-magic field, and the weight of a large caliber gun would inevitably have a negative impact on concealment, transportation, and usage. Over the past week, Anna, Agatha, Lucia, and Andrea worked together to solve the problem. After nearly 100 tests, they finally confirmed the data. To ensure a uniform force during firing, the god's stone of retaliation was processed into a cylinder with a width of 30 mm, and the outside was covered with a copper coat to form a sharp bullet. Therefore, the caliber of the bullet specially made for the Magic Slayer was an astonishing 35 mm, which felt like a small, heavy cannonball in one's hand. It was only at this size that the strength of the inner core was stable enough to not be shattered by the impact of the gunpowder. The lightless black hole, produced by the god's stone, was about 1.5 meters long, which meant that the gun itself had to be more than 2 meters long. Including the gun barrel, it was definitely outshone the rest. It was impossible to fit into the magic arc normally, so a disassembled design was necessary. At the same time, the increased caliber brought about a huge recoil, which made it impossible to use manual support like before. It had to be installed on a special stand to fire. Due to the above reasons, the final product looked extremely deformed. The shooter could not even reach the bolt, nor could he load the gun with his own strength. The weight of the entire gun in combat mode was almost equal to that of 2 adults, which indirectly reduced the number of people in the special task force. In addition, even with the muzzle brake and the gun frame as a buffer, the recoil could still injure the shooter. Fortunately, this new weapon was only intended to be used once, so it was not an unacceptable disadvantage. There were also benefits to the large caliber. The most obvious was the greatly improved range of the weapon. The effective range of a gun generally referred to the effective range. Bullets would still be lethal beyond this range, but because the trajectory was too erratic, it was impossible to determine the landing point, so it was worthless in actual combat. But for Andrea, the maximum range of a gun was the effective range. As long as the coin existed, she would be able to hit the target. This increased the theoretical range of the new weapon to more than 10 kilometers. Roland was beginning to understand why Edith had chosen the jungle. Compared to the anti-demon sniper rifle that Ashes could set up and fire, this weapon that could be called a cannon had to be assembled before it could be used, which greatly increased the preparation time. If they did not choose a secluded area, the risk of the plan would increase greatly. The last one is the retreat route. Edith pointed at the map and said, after the artillery attack on the Tequila, the First Army will send a unit to the left flank about 5 to 6 kilometers ahead to support the retreat of the Special Operations Group. As for when the ambush would begin, it would depend on the strength of the enemy's resistance. That is the gist of the plan. This plan, which had been discussed for nearly a week, was quickly approved by everyone. After some screening, the members of the 2 teams were also confirmed. The sniper team consisted of 5 people: Sylvie, Andrea, Camilla, Maggie, and Ashes. The first 4 could be said to be essential for the ambush, and the last protector was Ashes, who had the most balanced ability. The accompanying scout was Lightning. Compared to Maggie, her biggest advantage was that she could transport God's punishment bullets. As long as she was hung by a rope, the effect of the God's stone would not affect her. Otherwise, they would have to walk to the enemy's rear. The Seagull team consisted of 10 people, and the scout was Maggie. Except for Tilly and Vendi, the rest were God's punishment witches, led by Zoe. The team was smaller than expected, because the large-caliber shotguns, anti-demon grenades, and armor took up too much of the load, and this was under the condition that Hummingbird had halved the weight. As for the frontal battlefield, there was not much to say, they just had to fight steadily and advance step by step. The whole plan made full use of all available resources, but it also made Roland feel the lack of transportation capacity. Without the support of inland rivers and railways, the First Army could only send a limited number of troops. If he had an armored unit, he would not have to go through so much trouble. He could have taken a detour, cut off the enemy's supply, and then launched a pincer attack with the main force. Even if the Magic Slayer wanted to escape, he would be trapped on the grassland due to the lack of red mist. At the end of the meeting, Edith stood up again. She looked at Roland and seemed to be hesitating. "Is there anything else?" Roland asked, raising his eyebrows. "When the battle begins, I hope you can temporarily enter the third border city and the city hall." Edith paused for a moment. "And of course, the witches in the castle district." "What do you mean?" Bhairav, who had not been able to get a word in, finally found an opening. "Are you going to order His Majesty around?" Anna was a little moved. "Do you think the demons might attack Neverwinter?" "It's not very likely, but I can't rule it out." Edith looked much calmer after she spoke. The bloodline represents the upper limit, but it can't be roughly equated with the enemy's strength. For example, the red mist can support 3,000 demons in battle, but it can also support 1,000 demons to travel a longer distance. Since they've come here once, they can come again. If this time, they don't come here to threaten or warn us, but directly to the castle district. If it's not an ordinary mad demon but a senior demon. There was a brief silence. "Even if we have to give up the tequila?" Agatha asked with a frown. If it's inevitable that we'll lose, it's not about giving up. We'll just try to recover as much as possible. I see. Roland smiled relaxedly. Let's do as you say. Berev, you'll be in charge of the city hall. You know what to do, right? Yes, yes. Your Majesty. In fact, even if Edith did not mention it, Roland had planned to stay in the hall to watch the live broadcast. Although he could only see a corner of the tequila, it was still a rare opportunity. Everyone, I know what you're thinking. Roland stood up. There was no doubt that after this meeting, those who had the mission would rush to the front line and participate in the decisive battle for survival. He knew that it was time for the final speech. That's right. Victory is only one step away from us. Even though only a few people knew about this war, and even fewer knew its significance, there would be a day when it would be remembered by all of humanity. Before the Battle of Divine Will began, Grey Castle had taken the initiative to attack and keep the demons out of the fertile plains. Regardless of whether the demons are held up by the Sky Sea realm or not, the chances of victory will not be reduced. The only regret is that I can't go with you. The hall was silent, but everyone's eyes shone with a dazzling light. Defeat the demons and take down the tequila. I look forward to your fight. Roland looked around and said word by word. Chapter 1156. 2 days later, the Seagull slowly landed on a simple landing field next to the forest terminal. As soon as Tilly got off the plane, she saw Ashes waiting for her at the side of the field. As usual, whenever the glider needed to land here, Ashes would always come to see her, even if it was only for a short time. Sometimes, Lin Sanjiu wondered if Ashes had completed the task of protecting Ashes that Roland had given her. Don't worry. When I'm not around, Leaf will enter the state of Heart of Forest. No one can hurt her in this state. And every time, she is the one who notifies you of our arrival. And Ashes would always answer like this. How long will you be here today? Ashes asked when the crowd had dispersed and only the two of them were left. Until tomorrow morning. Looking at the familiar smile in Ash's eyes, Tilly did not feel as relaxed as she had expected. After all, she had boasted in the meeting that, I will persuade her myself, without any discussion, so she still felt a little guilty. Iron Axe and Edith will be accompanying me. Operation Torch is coming to its last step, so there are probably a lot of things to be done here. One night. Ashes seemed to be calculating. Then we can take a walk around the campsite. Leaf has planted a few experimental fruits, and they taste very good. In the evening, I will prepare a campfire and roast some game for you. Whenever she had time, she would always make arrangements like this, as if she did not want to waste a second. Not this time. There are a lot of things to prepare tonight. I'm afraid I won't have time. Ashes suddenly seemed to be depressed. She sighed and said, Okay. I understand. Tilly could not help but chuckle when she saw that the omnipotent extraordinary was in such a dejected mood. The anxiety in her heart also abruptly dissipated. But I'm not the one who's busy. It's you. After all, we'll be staying together for the next few days. You have to prepare well. Me? Yes, in order to intercept the demons, the Special Task Force needs your participation. So, you have to pack your luggage tonight and set off for the front line tomorrow morning. Of course, take the Seagull, she said with a smile. As for Leaf, Roland has also made arrangements. I will explain to her later. Ashes finally reacted. You could have told me this from the beginning. Tilly averted her gaze and ignored his protest. There's definitely not enough time to roast the game, but there should be no problem with trying some fruit. Do you want to take me there? Ashes immediately held out her hand. Of course. After dinner, when they returned to the camp, Tilly told her the battle plan made by the general staff. When it came to the sniping part, Ashes seemed to have already predicted her mission. But when it came to using the Seagull as a backup, her expression suddenly became serious. Don't tell me that the person piloting the Seagull is you. Tilly was silent for a moment and then looked into her eyes. I'm the most suitable candidate. But Roland promised me that he would take good care of you and never let you near the battlefield. Ashes stood up angrily. I have to confront him, he didn't agree. What? It's not Roland who agreed. Tilly took a deep breath. It's me. So, how do you think he will stop me? Tie me up or imprison me in the castle? Ashes was stunned for a moment. Of course, if it's a one-way trip, it's not impossible for him to do so. But as I said before, the seagull is just a backup. We will only intervene if Andrea can't finish the sniping. And all we have to do is to overtake the senior demon and release the god's punishment witches. Isn't that dangerous enough? You have to face the magic slayer, I knew you'd say that. Tilly interrupted helplessly. Did you think that we would keep pace with the enemy, overtake him, land right under his nose, and release the god's punishment witches? If not, what else can we do? Ashes frowned. The god's punishment witches can't fly. If we don't attract the enemy's attention and lure him into battle, this backup plan won't work at all. The most important part of luring the enemy was to show weakness so that the enemy would think that he could easily reap the victory. Otherwise, the magic slayer would only speed up his retreat, and placing himself as the bait was extremely risky. Fortunately, Edith isn't as simple-minded as you are. Tilly rolled her eyes. All the demon's actions are inseparable from the red mist, so we don't have to appear in front of them openly, nor do we have to use the seagull as bait. All we have to do is get rid of the enemy's supply team in advance. The magic slayer won't miss this opportunity. Otherwise, he won't be able to escape from this plane safely with only the gas tank he carries. In other words, the god's punishment witches are simply waiting for the magic slayer to exhaust himself and force him to fight. The time difference will be enough for Vendi and me to return to safety. Ashes could not think of a rebuttal. After a moment of hesitation, she said, but what if? Tilly shook her head. I'm not saying that this plan is absolutely safe, but it's risky. As I said, being the executor is part of the plan. Unless I'm as stupid as you, I won't put myself in danger. In fact, this is the main reason why I decided to come to the front. I can't rest easy if I don't keep an eye on you. Your Highness. Ashes was stunned. Say my name. However, before she could finish, Tilly had already grabbed her collar, pulled her down, stood on tiptoe, and kissed her on the lips. Ashes immediately felt a warm sensation. As far as she could remember, this was the first time that Princess Tilly had taken the initiative. After a while, Tilly pushed her away and slightly turned her head away. In the flickering candlelight, Ashes saw a slight blush on Tilly's face. Whether it was on Sleeping Island or in Neverwinter, every time you went on a long journey, I could only stay here and wait for you to come back. It could be a few days, or it could be a few months. But it wasn't like this in the beginning. When we were in the old King's City, no matter where we went, we were together. Why did we have to be so careful now? Was there no risk at all when we were being hunted by the church? Tilly paused for a moment and looked back into Ashes's eyes. This time, she did not look away. I don't want to wait alone anymore. Through those gray eyes, the extraordinaire confirmed her will. I see. Ashes let out a long sigh. In terms of persistence, the 4 members of the Wimbledon family were somewhat similar. But I have a condition. Don't force yourself. You have to prioritize safety when you encounter demons, right? Roland has already said that. Really, I'm not a fool. I should be able to judge the situation properly. That's not what I want to say. Huh? Tilly was slightly stunned. One more time. That's my condition. Chapter 1157. The next day, at Tower Station Number 9. The officers and decision-makers of the joint battlefront, who had been busy in Neverwinter for more than a week, finally returned to the frontline command center. However, this place could no longer be regarded as the real front line. Agatha noticed that on the map, the front line of the railway had almost reached within 15 kilometers of the Tequila ruins, and the area within a 5-kilometer radius had been marked as a green, safe zone. However, the area within 3 kilometers of the ruins had become bright red, which was obviously the most striking change in the past week. "You're finally back." The light of dawn, Phil and Eltek, quickly walked up to them and saluted them with a standard military salute. The other members of the army and the General Staff Department also stood up and saluted with joy on their faces. Perhaps it was because they saw that their backbone had returned, everyone had a look of relief in their eyes. Agatha was also a little relieved that her colleagues could still smile, which at least meant that the dangerous zone that had suddenly appeared did not threaten the entire torch plan. "Well done. It seems that everyone has been busy these days." Iron Axe nodded with satisfaction. He then walked up to the map and knocked on it. "Philin, come and report the situation. Did the demons receive reinforcements?" "No, sir," the Light of Dawn replied. "That trench was dug by the demons." "Trench?" Miss Sylvie was the first to discover the demons' movements. "Some demons crawled out of the red mist and started digging 6 days ago." Miss Lightning confirmed the situation and noticed that there were demons moving in the trench, so she marked it as a dangerous zone. Iron Axe, Edith, and Agatha exchanged a look. "Trench? We think so too." According to Lightning's drawing, although it looks very simple, its general layout is very similar to the trench in front of the First Army's position. The distance between the front and the back of the trench varies from 10 to dozens of meters, and there are many longitudinal trenches connecting them. Ferlin spread out a rather sloppy drawing in front of everyone and said, "The biggest difference between us and the demons is that they use more longitudinal trenches to gradually retreat, and all of them are basically in the same line. The deviation is no more than 2 meters, so the whole thing looks more orderly." "They're learning from humans," Agatha couldn't help but whisper. If the rumors before the first Battle of Divine Will were true, it meant that after nearly 1,000 years, the demons were once again imitating humans. Interesting. Edith pondered over the sketch and said, "Those trenches may not be used for retreat, but for attack." "Yes," Iron Axe agreed. "Hiding in the trenches can indeed reduce the chance of being hit by shrapnel, but they don't have any weapons that can fight against the Longsong cannons." "A few trenches can't change the situation. Only by attacking the First Army's position can we hope to win." "Is that why they built the longitudinal trench so close?" Philin also quickly came to a realization. "If they are all close together, they can indeed shorten the time of traveling." "Then what should we do?" Agatha asked. "Nothing," the Pearl of the Northern Region sneered. "When they dig into the firing range of the cannons, let the Black River open fire. It's a bit of a waste, but His Majesty has prepared enough ammunition for this battle. I'd like to see if they can dig their trenches to our front under the bombardment." Iron Axe looked at Philin and asked, "How's the construction of the railway going?" "The demons' counterattack has become more intense, but they haven't caused much damage," Iron Axe reported. "It's almost impossible for the mad demons to approach the First Army's position, so they rarely send out ground troops. Their main attacks are the devil beasts. But judging from the number of 10 to 15 devil beasts each time, I guess there are not many devil beasts left in the Tequila that can fly. If not for the senior demons, we could have killed more devil beasts." "The Magic Slayer is out again?" Agatha frowned. "More than once." Philin nodded. "Every time, the Magic Slayer would attract the anti-aircraft machine gun squad's fire, and the devil beasts would follow up and attack." His expression became solemn. "But every time I see it, I feel like I'm fighting a real monster." "How so?" Edith asked curiously. "The Magic Slayer usually plunges into the sky from the weakest point of the First Army's defense. When it lands, it can stun people for a few seconds, even if the soldiers are wearing God's stones of retaliation." Philin said slowly, "Without the protection of God's stones, for example, those workers who hide in the bunkers but can't control their curiosity will panic. The closer they are to the Magic Slayer, the more they will be affected. The devil beasts waiting in the clouds will take advantage of this opportunity to launch a surprise attack. Even though Sylvie would always inform the front lines in advance of every battle, it was still not an easy task to intercept a target that swooped down from above. Moreover, 1 or 2 hits would not be enough to cause fatal damage to it. Our best result so far is that we broke one of the Magic Slayer's arms when it landed. It seems that the Magic Slayer isn't so lucky sometimes, the Pearl of the Northern Region said with a smile. The problem is that when it reappeared a few days later, the broken arm would be as good as new, as if it had never been hit. Ferland's smile was slightly bitter. If that's all there is to it, then it's fine. We have Miss Nana. Perhaps they also have some kind of special treatment, but what? Iron Axe asked in a low voice. Several platoons of soldiers reported to the general staff that the Magic Slayer's movements are getting more and more difficult to follow, as if it's getting used to this level of combat. In the past, one machine gun could block its movements and force it to change its direction, but now it takes 2 or 3 platoons to do that. If it weren't for the weapons and God's stones of retaliation invented by His Majesty, I guess, it could kill all of us by itself. They did in the Union era, Agatha said through gritted teeth, and as long as it doesn't die, it can survive the next battle. As long as it doesn't die. Senior demons evolve through constant battles. The more heavily injured they are, the more powerful they will be when they come back. This is true both in terms of magic power and combat skills. Many extraordinaries died in their hands. Not only did they fail to overcome that obstacle, but they also helped them advance further. The Ice Witch closed her eyes. But not every demon can survive a serious injury. The only reason it can recover in such a short time is because of its own ability. You mean, a senior demon that can curse and heal itself at the same time? Iron Axe's expression became serious. Chapter 1158. Agatha, Iron Axe, and Edith took the train to the front line to meet the needs of Neverwinter's battle plan. In order to meet the dual needs of firepower and material transportation, the double-track railway was divided into 4 branches, which were exactly the same as the station area. Although the increase in the amount of work slowed down the construction, the command headquarters knew that Tower Station No. 10, the terminus of the Torch Plan, would probably not appear in the final battle. If they waited until the fortress-like station was built, the demons would not be able to change the situation no matter what they did. The enemy's commander should be very clear about this. The Black River, which was made of steel, was extremely difficult to destroy. Even if the transportation was interrupted for 2 or 3 days, the humans could use the station to resupply until the railway was repaired. This made the usual tactic of cutting off the demons' retreat useless. Attacking the well-defended station under the front line of fire would undoubtedly be suicidal. The demons' only chance was to stop the First Army from advancing before Station No. 10 was built. In other words, there was no clear time for the decisive battle, it could break out at any time. Therefore, the bunkers, trenches, and bunkers on both sides of the railway were arranged according to the scene of the battle. In addition, Agatha noticed that the railway, which was originally facing the Holy City, was slightly deflected so that one side of the train was parallel to the Tequila. In His Majesty's words, this was the most suitable battle line for the carrier-mounted artillery. Standing at the end of the railway were 2 armored trains called Black River. They served as mobile fortresses. 4 groups of rotating machine gun turrets were ready to fire at demons who attempted to approach the position. The mobile 152mm Longsong cannon mounted on the train pointed to the sky, always aiming in the direction of the Tequila City. The Ice Witch climbed up the watchtower in the center of the camp step by step. The ruins, which were covered by a variety of lush plants, gradually appeared in her sight. Although she had long known this would happen, she still felt an indescribable shock and sorrow when she saw the ruins of her homeland. Although more than 400 years had passed, she could still see the shadow of the Holy City in the ruins. "Were you born in that place?" Edith asked. Agatha nodded. Memories of the past rushed into her mind. "Congratulations." From today on, you're a member of the Union. As expected of the youngest High Awakened in history. The Quest Society welcomes you. Sis, you're amazing. Do you know what you are doing? They are all warriors who have sacrificed their lives for the Union. They are only unconscious now, but you want to turn them into test subjects. It's not like you don't know how low the chances of recovering from a severe head injury are. Compared to dying like this, they must want to make a greater contribution to the experiment. I can't accept it. This is an order personally signed by Lady Alice. If you can't accept it, then you can leave. Master, the city wall has been breached. I'm afraid the Allied army won't be able to hold on for much longer. Let's go. But my sister hasn't come back yet. She is a member of the garrison guards. It is impossible for her to leave the line of defense. If you die here, you will be letting her down. Take this opportunity to escape. But, sir, where can we go after leaving Tequila? Don't give up. We still have hope. Climb over the mountains, cross the river, go to the barbarian land, to rebuild the order. Why do you insist until the end? If you escape now, you might be able to survive. Although I don't have magic power, I understand many things. It is my duty to protect you. Your Majesty, she is awake. Images flashed by one after another, like a reincarnation. In the eyes of most witches in the Union, she was an anomaly. Although she was a genius, she was controversial because of her attitude towards mortals. Later, she was ostracized by the Quest Society because of the God's Punishment Army plan. She had no choice but to continue her research in the private experimental tower in the concealing forest. Even so, Agatha still had indelible feelings for Tequila. This city was once regarded as the last fortress of mankind. Countless heroic deeds had been born there. Thousands of witches and hundreds of thousands of ordinary people had fallen on the battlefield against the demons. Her sister was one of them. She still did not know which section of the collapsed city wall she was buried under. Escaping did not bring her a sense of relief. Instead, it became a heavy responsibility. Whenever she closed her eyes, she would hear the cries for help of countless people who had died in the battle. She was not a deserter. Every time she had a nightmare, Agatha would repeatedly tell herself that she lived for revenge and to one day reclaim this land that belonged to mankind. She believed that the God's Punishment witches also had this belief and persevered to this day. Their lives no longer belonged to them. Among the ruins on the horizon, two towering giant skeletons could be faintly seen. They were the demons' new war weapons and also the source of the nightmare. She looked at Iron Axe and said, I have a request. Go ahead. The Majins nodded. If the First Army can successfully advance to within 10 kilometers of Tequila, I hope that the God's Punishment witches and I can fire the first round of shells. Only thunder and flame could end this nightmare. The roar of the cannons would inevitably raze the ruins of the holy city to the ground. The few remaining city ruins would also turn into ashes along with the skeletons of the people who had died in the battle and become a part of the fertile plains. But Tequila would usher in a new life in the midst of destruction. 3 days later, in the evening, when the engineering team worked overtime to lay the railway about 12 kilometers away from Tequila, Sylvie was the first to notice the demons' unusual movements. A large number of mad demons crawled out of the ground corroded by the red mist under the feet of the giant skeletons and rushed into the trench. Then two huge shadows appeared in front of the broken city wall and slowly moved toward the position. She immediately realized that they were two enormous God's Stones of Retaliation. Just like the God's Stone of Retaliation pillars found in the Battle of North Slope Mountain, they were probably as large as some of the small original ores in the mine. The shadow covered an area of nearly 150 meters. More importantly, it completely blocked the magic eye's line of sight, causing the scene behind it to be completely hidden in the darkness. There were now two blind spots in the perfect circle of investigation. No matter what the demons wanted to do with the God's Stones, it was already a desperate attempt for the demons of Tequila to mobilize thousands of mad demons at once. There was no doubt that this was a sign that a war was about to break out. Sylvie immediately picked up the phone to the underground command center. Chapter 1159. As the alarm went off, the front line immediately entered the highest state of emergency response. Quick, quick! Drop the tools in your hands and find the nearest shelter passage. The soldiers in charge of evacuation guided the construction team to evacuate the construction site. Don't push and don't look around. Remember, no matter what happens outside, don't leave the shelter. Shelter number 6 is full. We can't fit anyone in shelter number 7 either. Move back to the next shelter. Don't block the passage. Move. This was not the first time such a thing had happened. Although the soldiers were yelling and the atmosphere was quite tense, it did not lose order. Nearly 2,000 workers dispersed like a tide and entered one underground shelter after another along the preset evacuation passage. These temporary shelters, built by Lotus, were located behind the defensive line and were covered with steel plates. Not only could they allow passage, but they could also effectively resist spear attacks and machine gun fire. As long as the outer perimeter was not lost, hiding in it meant safety. After the crowd retreated, the originally brightly lit construction site was soon shrouded in darkness. The evacuation of the construction team is basically complete. The blackout is normal. The First Army is entering the position. Sylvie quickly looked around and conveyed the latest situation to the various units. At this moment, the observation room set up above the command center was the busiest place in the front line. More than 10 telephones on the long table rang one after another. The staff officers in charge of answering the calls sat around the table and would only inform Sylvie after confirming the importance of the message. On the other side, many staff officers summarized the information and fed it back to the SAN table or map to provide key information for the command center to make decisions. If Sylvie used to be the eye of the army, now the observation room with her as the center had become the information center of the entire army. As long as she was in charge, the operational efficiency of the First Army would be several times higher than usual. Yes, I got it. Miss Sylvie, Vanner from the artillery battalion is calling. He hopes you can provide the enemy's position and test firing coordinates. Black River number 1 and number 2 also sent the same request. Let them wait a little longer. Sylvie glanced at the front line. The shadow was not advancing very fast. It was probably a little slower than walking. They had just entered the shooting range of 10 kilometers. According to their current speed, it would probably take them 5 to 6 hours to reach the front line. Therefore, the most urgent task was to find out the demon's intentions. What kind of tricks did they want to use the blind spots of the God's Stone of Retaliation? When magic detection was ineffective, eyes were undoubtedly the most reliable method. She picked up the sigil of listening. Lightning, Maggie, can you hear me? Where are you now? I just took off. Maggie is right above me. Not long after, the answer came from the other talisman. At the same time, there was a loud alarm. What happened? Have the demons launched an all-out attack on us? From the looks of it, it looks like it, but the enemy has interfered with the magic eye's observation, and the range is very large. I'm guessing it's the same as the last time, a large God's Stone of Retaliation. Understood. I'll go take a look. Leave it to us, Ku. In contrast to the busy atmosphere in the observation room, in Lightning's eyes, the battlefield looked completely different. The flames under her feet were shrinking as if swallowed by the night sky. The land in the distance was pitch black, and it seemed deep and quiet. The fertile plains seemed to be in a deep sleep. There was no sign of an impending war. If not for Sylvie's warning, it would be hard to imagine that the demons were already charging at them. Maggie, turn on the night vision mode. Ku. The white pigeon's feathers rapidly expanded and wrapped around its body. Then a huge head popped out of the feathers, its round eyes almost occupying the entire eye sockets. The owl's transformation is complete, Ku. Let's go. Lightning held the giant owl above her head with both hands and flew northeast. However, before they could get close to the tequila, Sylvie's urgent voice suddenly came from the sigil of listening. The investigation is cancelled. You two, come back. The magic slayer is on the move. Lightning suddenly shivered, and even her limbs seemed to have stiffened. After trying to suppress the fear in her heart, she bit her lip and replied, even so, it shouldn't be that easy to find me. And, if I go back now, I won't be able to find out what the demon is hiding with the god's stone, right? But, don't worry. It can't catch up with me with the stone of flight. I just need to avoid its large-scale magic suppression. Lightning clenched her fists. Although her palms were sweating, she did not want to run away like this. After more than half a year on the battlefield, she knew that she was not a brave person. Not only the gods punishment witches, but even the conductor was much braver than she was. However, she was not alone. She had Maggie, Lorger, Joan, and many other companions to support her. They gave her the courage to start anew after facing her true self. She gradually regained her strength and began to investigate the demon again. After many hurdles, she finally arrived at the place where she had fallen half a year ago. There were only 2 hurdles left for her to overcome. She had to fly past the magic slayer and she would give him a heavy blow in return for hurting her. Maggie, I'll leave him to you. Lightning unbuttoned her collar and forced the owl into her flight suit, leaving only its head exposed. She then accelerated to the speed of sound. She could fly at such a speed for only 10 kilometers. SSS. Be careful, the enemy. SSS. They've noticed you. Sylvie's voice became intermittent, probably due to the influence of the magic resonance. Even without this warning, Lightning knew that she had been exposed. As long as the demon was not deaf, it would undoubtedly be able to hear the sonic boom. However, she moved faster than sound, which meant that when the demon heard the explosion, she had already flown over their heads. A few seconds later, Maggie's eagle eye found the target. The monster is in front of you on the right, Coo. Under the hazy moonlight, Lightning had not yet found the magic slayer, but she already saw a circle of black light spreading out. Undoubtedly, the senior demon's low-light vision was better than Maggie's. Not only had the senior demon seen her, but it had also approached her flight path and activated the anti-magic field before she could stop it. In an instant, she raised her speed to the limit and changed from a horizontal flight to a dive. For a moment, Lightning even felt that the gloomy and cold black light had already grabbed her ankle. However, the illusion soon disappeared. In a breath's time, she had already left the black light far behind her. After breaking through the Magic Slayer's blockade, there was no longer any threat in front of her. She pulled herself up and flew across the demon's territory in a straight arc. She had a panoramic view of what was happening below. In the dim moonlight, Lightning saw 2 large god stones that had been cut into cylindrical shapes and were being pushed forward like rolling stones. The stone pillars were at least 20 meters long and nearly 3 meters high. At first glance, they looked like an upside-down clock tower. Behind each pillar were 7 or 8 spider demons. They squeezed together and crawled slowly, pushing the god's stones of retaliation toward the first army. Chapter 1160. After passing through the encampment, Lightning once again ascended into the sky, and then stopped. What's wrong, Coo? Maggie asked, raising her head. Instead of replying, she turned around and looked in the direction of Tequila. In the darkness of the night, 200 meters was the limit of her vision. It was like looking for a needle in a haystack to find the magic slayer under such circumstances. But it did not matter that she could not see him. Lightning knew that the magic slayer could see her. From the direction of the tequila, she should be facing away from the moon. As long as the magic slayer looked up, he would not be able to miss a shadow in the white moon. But he did not chase after her. The only reason was that the magic slayer had realized that she was too fast for him to catch up with. He gave up on the pointless attempt. She had won this round. Lightning took a deep breath and stretched out her right hand. Although her fingertips were still trembling, she plucked up her courage and stuck out her middle finger. That was the gesture that His Majesty had taught her, a symbol of victory. Then she turned around and flew back to her own camp without looking back. At the same time, she told Sylvie what she had seen. A regular cylinder made of God's stone of retaliation. I see. Sylvie recorded the approximate size and handed it to Agatha. It was a basic skill for the senior members of the Quest Society to estimate the shape of the shadow and the position of the stone according to the volume of the God's stone. Soon, the corrected data was sent back to the observation room. Although there was a visual error, it was better than firing randomly. Sylvie used the eye of magic to determine the position and picked up the phone of the artillery battalion. After a while, the Longsong cannons exploded for the first time. Even though the flames that came out of the barrel were like fireflies that disappeared in a flash, they were still extremely eye-catching in the plains that were shrouded in darkness. When more cannons joined the attack, the light from the muzzles even faintly reflected the outline of the Longsong cannons. Sometimes, the flaming tail of the bullet would leave a short trail as if it were a shooting star leaping from the earth. On the other side, the echoes of the explosions were endless. The fertile plains, which had been in a deep sleep, had finally been awakened. So beautiful, coo. Maggie murmured as she stared at the cannons that appeared and disappeared from time to time. Lightning stood against the wind and clenched her fists. Now, there was only one last obstacle left. Osrook floated in the air, coldly looking at the mud pillars rising in front of his troops. This was the most threatening attack the humans had so far. As long as the projectiles landed in the middle of the army, they could instantly take the lives of more than 10 primal demons. Moreover, its power didn't need to be displayed through contact. Even if they were separated by several dozen meters, the metal shards shot out by the projectiles were enough to penetrate armor and tear flesh apart. Even it didn't have the confidence to block a direct hit. In his report to the Sky Lord, he named this weapon, Fiery Rain. In addition, there were also, fire crossbows, that could continuously shoot bolts, fire sticks, that could be carried by one person. All the current evolution of human beings undoubtedly came from the element of fire. Compared to the inheritance promotion that the Grand Lord thought, it was more inclined to be a kind of coincidence. In terms of the diversity of abilities, witches were better. If a suitable awakened appeared in the next few hundred years, coupled with the long-term study of fire, it was not impossible to achieve a great leap in power. However, even if human beings had embarked on a path that was completely different from theirs, it didn't mean that he was helpless. For example, the rolling stones made from the god's punishment origin showed that they were hard enough to resist the fiery rain. Osrook clearly saw that the god's stone was still intact after several direct hits and violent explosions. When the opponent's projectiles hit the edge of the stone pillars, they would even directly bounce off without leaving a hole. The real danger was the fiery rain that happened to pass the stone pillars and hit the tombstones. Their impenetrable armor was completely vulnerable in front of the fiery rain. Once they were hit, they would basically be torn into pieces. Ironically, the king had high hopes for these extremely tough symbiotic demons that neither felt pain nor fear. He believed that they were the most valuable breakthrough from the inheritance shard. Not only did they greatly enhance the supply ability of the frontline, but they also enriched the tribe's combat methods. Only 100 tombstones were needed to completely wipe out the human beings, which were lowly insects in the eyes of most of the tribe. Thus, the Grand Lord handed it exactly 100 tombstones, not too many and not too few. However, after more than half a year of fighting, not only were the humans not wiped out, but the Tequila tribe was already on the verge of collapse. Osrook could now still control less than 40% of the tombstones. If the Sky Lord didn't trust the king too much on this point, he wouldn't be in such a difficult situation now. If these symbiotic demons were all used up on the road, he could only let the primal demons fight them. That would be no different from suicide. The impact of the fiery rain on the god's stone of punishment pillars was not something the primal demons could withstand. Even the obsidian claws of the tombstones could be shaken off, let alone their bodies. But Osruk didn't care. Because these sacrifices were all worth it. And the humans would pay for their sacrifice. 10:00 at night, in the underground command center. The battle had lasted for nearly 3 hours. Every 5 minutes, Iron Axe would hear the dull sound of cannon fire coming from above his head. At the same time, there would be sparse dust falling. Other than that, there was no other movement on the battlefield. It was as if the demons hadn't launched an attack and the First Army had been firing at the air all along. This was completely different from the experience of previous battles. In order to save ammunition and protect the cannons, he had asked the artillery battalion to extend the firing interval and aim most of the firepower at the back of the Black Shadows. The problem was that even if such an attack caused real damage to the demons, the magic eye could not see the results of the battle. The only thing he could be sure of was that the 152 mm long song cannons could not destroy the god's stone of punishment pillars. Although the dense bombardment could slow down the Black Shadows, they would eventually recover. Iron Axe had no idea how the spider demons managed to make such a big guy roll over the crater. Damn it! Iron Axe punched the table angrily. If it was daytime, these monsters wouldn't have survived until now. The biggest problem the First Army was facing was that no one knew where the cannonballs had landed. In order to hit the target, the cannons had to fire many times to find the correct landing point. However, when faced with 2 blind zones that were more than 150 meters wide and almost infinite in length, every shot was equivalent to a test shot without any feedback. According to Sylvie's observation, the Magic Slayer did not break into the camp. Instead, he was cruising above the Black Shadows, obviously on guard against lightning. Although lightning was faster than the enemy, flying at such a high speed consumed a lot of magic power. It was still possible to sneak in once or twice, but it was too dangerous for the Magic Slayer to stay above the Black Shadows, shake off the Magic Slayer, and at the same time, provide him with a landing point. Without any feedback, they would not be able to attack again. As a result, it would be difficult to quickly destroy the enemy's forces with concentrated firepower. The current situation was like a bet. He could pour all the cannonballs into the Black Shadows and completely stop them, but as long as the enemy withdrew the spider demons, the First Army would be wasting their ammunition. Apart from the Black Shadows, there were also many mad demons on the 2 flanks, as if they wanted to form a pincer attack. If the cannons were aimed at them, they would immediately know the result of the battle. However, these demons were very scattered, and it would be a pity to focus on them. That's why the enemy chose to attack at night, Edith said calmly. Edith said calmly, this is already a gratifying result. Without Sylvie, we wouldn't even know where the enemy is, let alone the blind spot of the shadow. Besides, the demons were always on the receiving end. They didn't panic, so you don't have to worry about it. I just don't want to waste the ammunition that I've accumulated with great difficulty, Iron Axe said with a frown. Chapter 1161. When the 2 groups of shadows crossed the midfield and advanced to the 5-kilometer zone, the First Army raised the reconnaissance balloons and stopped the artillery bombardment. The Magic Slayer also noticed this, but he could not understand the intention of the humans. The levitating sphere was supposed to be used to see things from a high vantage point, but what was the point of ascending to a higher vantage point when he could not even see anything at night? While the rain of fire stopped, the Magic Slayer ordered the soldiers to speed up. When the shadows crossed the 4-kilometer line, the artillery battalion completed the latest round of ammunition preparation and set up the flare launchers. Since the first night attack, Neverwinter had rushed to produce a batch of simple lighting equipment. It was not much different from a mortar, except that a parachute was installed at the tail of the shell and the explosive at the head was replaced by a mixture of magnesium and aluminum powder that could burn continuously. The first flare could be used in the same launcher as the mortar shell, but during tests, it was found that the brightness and burning time of the small caliber flare were not good enough, so they replaced it with a special large-caliber launcher. Although the soldiers could not shoot as accurately as they could in the daytime, they could at least show the general environment of the battlefield. However, the First Army had never used it in actual combat, which was also the suggestion of the general staff. When the enemies approached the edge of the 3-kilometer zone, Iron Axe could not wait to give the order to counterattack. Yes! Vanner yelled after he hung up the phone. Flare, maximum angle, fire. With a few soft bangs, several dazzling balls of light suddenly exploded in the night sky. The orange flames dispelled the darkness and revealed the outline of the earth. Then more flare rose into the sky, ignited, and fell. Within the 3-kilometer area in front of the position, it was as if a row of small suns had appeared. Although they could not change the day and night, they made the stars and the moon lose their luster for a moment. The huge stone pillars, spider demons, and mad demons that had been hiding in the night sky also showed themselves. Even if it was only a small area, it was enough to point out the target for the cannons. After a round of test firing, the dense shells whizzed toward the back of the god's stone. Unlike the previous aimless shooting, this time the cannons were completely prepared. The demons were obviously stunned and did not know whether to move forward or to flee from the area that was suddenly covered by the light. For a moment, they were stuck in a stalemate. In an instant, a deafening explosion engulfed the enemy's crooked marching troops. Osrook looked at the light balls that were slowly falling from the sky, and his indifferent expression finally showed a trace of change. Now, it understood the significance of humans raising the floating sphere. 6 months ago, they were still at their wits' end against the night attack and could only passively guard the camp. But now, they had come up with a countermeasure, and they had endured until now to use it. Whether it was in terms of methods or temperament, he could no longer be treated as a harmless bug. Such a human could already be considered as their opponent. He had to let the king understand this. It instantly made a judgment. At the same time, Osrook made up his mind. Cutting off the enemy's eyes and arms was the most important goal at the moment. Otherwise, this unit might bring endless trouble to the tribe's development plans. It shifted its gaze back to its feet. Under the bombardment of the humans' fire rain, the god's stone pillars of punishment and the follow-up troops had begun to disconnect. According to the original plan, these pillars should be able to push into the tombstone's attack range. At that time, they would be able to cooperate with the primal demons on both sides to launch an attack to recover the disadvantage in range and maximize the killing efficiency of the troops. But now, the illuminated area had cut off the army's route. If they forced their way through, they would only become the target of the fire rain. After losing the cover of the night, the originally hidden blind spot had become a narrow stretch of land of death. Destroy those light balls? No, the humans obviously had as many of these things as they wanted. Not to mention that there were people in the camp watching it. Osrook suddenly increased its speed and flew toward the enemy's camp. After avoiding a series of fire crossbows, it landed in front of a floating sphere and rushed to grab the observer's neck when he jumped out of the basket. Looking at the terrified human, Osrook revealed a ferocious smile and then tore the human in half. Then it threw the body down, raised its head and let out a sharp howl. Along with the howl was the order for the general attack. Sensing its will, the primal demons also let out the same roar. They all rushed out of their hiding places and launched a final charge toward the human camp. In an instant, the earth was boiling. The battle finally returned to the way the First Army was most familiar with. A large number of demons emerged from the blind spot, and for a moment, it seemed that the enemy was everywhere. The rising flares illuminated the last 3 kilometers. The mortars and heavy machine guns opened fire almost at the same time, as if they were going to overturn the entire ground. Probably because both sides knew the meaning of this decisive battle, they did not hold back once the battle began. The two forces collided and instantly turned the plain into a bloody meat grinder. As long as the mad demons crawled into the spear-throwing range, they would not hesitate to throw bone spears until their arms were useless. Even if their legs were broken and their bodies were pierced, they would continue to wriggle forward with blue blood trailing behind them. And the First Army did not take a step back. The machine gun squad poured out bullets like water. Even in the face of the spider demon's stone needles, they did not have the slightest intention of dodging. After the exposed shooters were shot down, the wounded and the dead would immediately be replaced by the new squad members. The only time they could stop was when they had to replace the broken barrels. The fierce battle lasted from midnight until dawn. When the first rays of dawn appeared in the sky, dozens of devil beasts joined the battle. Under the morning light, this was undoubtedly the demon's last chance. At this time, the pressure on the ground had greatly decreased. More machine gun squads raised their muzzles and worked with the anti-aircraft squad to form an airtight anti-aircraft net. The Magic Slayer tried to break into the defensive lines several times, but he was forced back by the dense hail of bullets. The scales of victory were gradually tipping in the humans' favor. At noon, the gunfire subsided. Agatha followed Iron Axe and the others out of the underground command center and slowly walked to the front of the battlefield. The air was still filled with the pungent smell of gunpowder, but she found it surprisingly attractive. The grassland, which had been lush and green yesterday, was now a mess. There were potholes and corpses everywhere. The enemy's blood flowed along the ground and soaked into the soil. The grass and shrubs in the way reflected a faint blue luster under the sun. The Tequila ruins in the distance were still occupied by the giant skeletons, but Agatha knew that after this battle, the demons would no longer be able to stop the humans' advance. They were only one step away from retaking the Holy City. We won. Roland did not know who shouted first. Maybe it was a common soldier, a witch, or a Tequila survivor. But it did not matter anymore, because the next moment, cheers of victory spread through the entire camp. Chapter 1162. The celebration only lasted for a short while before the front line became busy again. Treating the wounded, calculating the results of the battle, advancing the railway, cleaning up the battlefield. These were all urgent tasks. The command center was well aware that the victory of this battle did not mean the end of Operation Torch. Judging from the number of demons left, it was impossible for them to launch another attack of such a large scale. The capture of Tequila was almost a foregone conclusion. However, no one dared to take it lightly until the last step. Moreover, the Magic Slayer was still alive. If they could not completely eliminate this threat, they would not be able to achieve their goal. The victory of the human race was indeed worthy of celebration, but they would have to wait until they could raise the flag of Grey Castle at the highest point of the ruins and return to Neverwinter. After some discussion, the leaders of the United Front reached a consensus. After eliminating the demons in this battle, there should be less than 500 enemies left in the ruins of the Holy City. In terms of strength, this meant that the demons could no longer pose a direct threat to the First Army. Compared to the previous steady advance, the first priority now was to prevent the Magic Slayer from escaping. The construction of Tower Station No. 10 could be slowed down so that the demons would not lose their will to fight. At the same time, the ambush should be carried out as soon as possible. Even without Sylvie's reconnaissance, the First Army was unlikely to be ambushed. In order to avoid trouble, after a day of rest, the First Army began to bombard the demons again. This time, however, they were on the offensive. In the face of the whistling shells, the only thing the enemies could do was to retreat step by step. They left the trenches and retreated into the ruins of Tequila. During this period, only the Magic Slayer could threaten the defensive line. However, as the main target, it was difficult for him to even approach the encampment, let alone stop the First Army from advancing. As the Magic Slayer returned without success, the number of times he was dispatched became less and less. On the fourth day after the battle, the railway finally reached the firing range of 10 kilometers. After the cannons were set up, Iron Axe invited Agatha, Phyllis, and the other soldiers to stand in front of the Longsong cannons. As the number of cannons was far from enough, Vanner, the commander of the artillery battalion, specially prepared a dozen hemp ropes and tied them together with the firing cord. In this way, they could fire the first cannon aimed at Tequila City at the same time. The awakened who was born in Tequila, the avenger who purified Tequila, and the builder of the new holy city in the future. Every god's punishment which realized that this would be a historic moment. Regardless of whether they could survive until the Battle of Divine Will, this scene would be remembered in history. I must apologize. Holding the rope, Phyllis whispered to Agatha, 400 years ago, I laughed behind your back at the way you used mortals, saying that handing over the important work at hand to them would only make the result a mess. Many people did say that back then. The Ice Witch smiled. What about now? Now. Phyllis curled up the corner of her mouth. It doesn't feel bad to fight alongside mortals. Ready, at this moment, Vanna raised the command flag. Fire. Everyone pulled back the firing cord at the same time. A rumbling sound immediately echoed over the battlefield. More than a dozen cannonballs soared into the sky, swept across the plain, and fell into the ruins of the holy city. Violent shockwaves spread in all directions along with a series of explosions, sweeping through the ruins of the ancient city that was left behind 400 years ago. Along with the shockwaves and stone fragments, the demons that were hiding within were torn apart. It's begun, Sylvie said in a low voice. Yes, Andrea replied casually. Even though she could not see the situation in Tequila, she could hear the muffled explosions. The tremor was completely different from the roar of the cannons. Even from 7 or 8 kilometers away, she could feel the power contained in the explosions. It was hard to imagine how the demons would feel after being bombarded by the Longsong cannons for a whole night. It's the 5th day, isn't it? Maggie mumbled. Will the Magic Slayer come today? Who knows? Ashes shrugged. I want to go back to Neverwinter and eat hot pot and fried dumplings. Gulp. Before her voice trailed off, everyone heard the sound of their stomachs moving. Of course, teppanyaki is good too. It would be even better if we could have some ice cream bread. Ashes stuffed a piece of dry food into Maggie's mouth. If you're hungry, eat more of this. It doesn't taste good, but at least it'll fill you up. Don't forget that we're still on a mission, Camilla Derry added. We can worry about food when we get back. Now, please focus on your duty. She was still as serious as ever, even though she had just swallowed her saliva a moment ago. Andrea shook her head and turned her attention back to the Tequila ruins. While the First Army was on the offensive, the Special Task Force also left the camp according to their plan. They went around the ruins of Tequila and hid in the woods to the west of the supply line. Since they could not determine the Magic Slayer's intention and time, they could only wait patiently for an opportunity to come. Although it was not difficult for the witches to survive in the wild, considering the devil beasts in the sky, they did not even have a tent to shelter them from the rain, let alone a fire to roast the game. Every night, they would sleep in the trees wrapped in thick cloth and eat wheat cakes when they were hungry. Of course, it was not comfortable for them. To be honest, when she heard Maggie's words just now, she suddenly missed Neverwinter very much. When she first moved from Sleeping Island to Neverwinter with Tilly, she had thought it was just another place to settle down and that the so-called home of witches was just a bluff. If Tilly decided to leave, she would follow her without hesitation. However, now that she was faced with this problem, she was not so sure. Even as a member of the Quinn nobility, she had never enjoyed such a comfortable life, a large, soft bed, a variety of delicious dishes, automatic hot and cold water supply, and a heater that allowed her to walk barefoot in winter. It was not just a luxury that came from the Golden Dragon. Instead, it was an exquisite and unique life. She found it hard to make a decision when she thought about saying goodbye to all these. Fortunately, Tilly and Roland got along well, so she did not have to worry about where she should go for the time being. When we get rid of the Magic Slayer, I must ask His Majesty to reward me, Andrea thought. The most ideal outcome was that the Magic Slayer would defend the Tequila and be blasted into pieces by the cannons. The second scenario was that the Magic Slayer did not notice the existence of the ambush team and was killed by the God's Wrath bullet in the air. The worst scenario was that the Magic Slayer had already noticed their long-range precision attack ability and was flying close to the ground and constantly changing directions to avoid them. In that case, they would have to rely on the seagull to intercept them. However, she was not very confident in the first two scenarios. 5 days ago, during the night battle, the Magic Slayer had once approached the camp from the tequila. However, he had been moving irregularly the whole time and did not give her a chance to attack. Was it a coincidence, or was he deliberately guarding against her? Awoo! Suddenly, a strange cry reached everyone's ears. What happened? Ashes asked. A cannonball hit the giant skeleton. Sylvie exclaimed. There's a big hole in its back. My God, that thing is howling. So it can also feel pain. Just by looking at it, I thought it was just an empty shell. The place where it was hit is spewing out red mist, like blood. Sylvie gazed toward the southeast with a grave expression. The Magic Slayer is on the move. He's charging toward our position. I hope someone can kill it with one shot. Andrea spread out her hands. Wait, no, the Magic Slayer turned back halfway. Sylvie observed for a moment and could not help but frown. What's going on? The giant skeleton seems to be retreating. Some demons tried to stop the giant skeleton, but they were trampled to a pulp. The ruins are in a mess, they are. After a while, she said in an uncertain tone, the demons are killing each other? Andrea and Ashes exchanged a look. No matter how they looked at it, it was a sign of defeat. Could it be that the Magic Slayer could not bear the pressure and had completely lost the will to fight? Soon, Sylvie's words confirmed their suspicions. Chapter 1163. Andrea. Camilla yelled. I know. Andrea quickly grabbed the gun, closed her eyes, and threw all distracting thoughts to the back of her mind. I didn't notice. Andrea muttered in her mind several times before she suddenly opened her eyes. In an instant, her vision suddenly became distorted. Everything in front of her seemed to have countless overlapping images. They stretched and overlapped with each other, and continued to extend into the distance. That was the perception of the magic eye surging into her brain. As the layers of trees and land that should have been blocked appeared one by one, the closed worlds suddenly became open and free. At the same time, Sylvie's consciousness was also connected. When the double images in her eyes completely merged together, her gaze had already followed the other's train of thought and was cast several kilometers away. A familiar figure in pitch-black armor was reflected in her eyes. What was even more intense than her vision was the Magic Slayer's surging magic power, which burst out from his body and was so dense that it was almost tangible. Perhaps the skeleton's escape was too sudden, or the loss of Tequila was too great a blow, but the Magic Slayer was flying straight in the air without any guards around him. What's the situation? Ashes asked in a low voice. The Magic Slayer didn't notice us. Andrea replied excitedly. He's flying toward the supply line. Although he's a little to the east, he's still within the gun's firing range. Load the gun, there's no better chance than this. Ashes nodded and stuffed the huge god's punishment bullet into the barrel. Then, with a click, she pushed the bolt back into the gun. The Magic Slayer was about 8 to 9 kilometers away. The wind was blowing in the northeast, and there were no other demons around. This was the ideal situation. Andrea focused all her attention on the target and held her breath to activate her ability. Countless lines swarmed out and converged on the Magic Slayer. Some of them twisted and turned, while others rose and fell. It was hard to imagine that a bullet could leave such a strange trail. But soon, most of the lines dimmed, leaving only a silver curve that shone brighter and brighter. She had found the coin that was going up. At the same time, the magic power in her body was rapidly decreasing. She did not have much time to hesitate. This was her only chance. Andrea gritted her teeth and pulled the trigger. Accompanied by a deafening explosion, she felt as if her shoulder was hit by something heavy, and her whole body fell backward. Ashes, who was at the side, was already prepared and pulled her into the crook of her arm with one hand. I really don't want to be hugged like this. The corner of Andrea's mouth twitched, but her body relaxed. At this moment, her shoulder was almost numb, as if she had lost all feeling. Even if he didn't look, he knew that there must be a red swelling under his clothes. If not for Nana's treatment, he was afraid that it would take a few days to recover. This was the burden brought about by the large caliber. Even if they used a variety of buffering methods, including muzzle recoil, the remaining impact could not be underestimated. During the weapon test, she had already noticed that even if she created more God's punishment bullets, there would not be a second chance to fire. Whether it was her magic capacity, her physical strength, or the load on the arc, all of them limited her ability. However, the ability to kill in one strike was what she was most proud of. Fighting back and forth with the enemy and being bathed in blood was something only a barbarian liked to do. For example, the guy who was holding her now. If it weren't for the fact that Sylvie is feeling the same way as you, I wouldn't care about you at all. Ashes rolled her eyes. Look at the result, the magic slayer. Wait a moment. Andrea made a shushing gesture. The bullet is still on its way. The silver line in her vision was rapidly shrinking. Its end was no longer connected to the magic slayer, but crisscrossed in front of him, forming a subtle angle. From her point of view, it looked like the relationship between the bullet and the demon was a mutual competition. They were heading for the same target and would eventually converge at a single point. Once the trigger was pulled, the result was already decided. The God's punishment bullet would fly along the predetermined trajectory, and the only variable was the target. If the magic slayer suddenly changed direction, nothing would happen. 25 seconds was neither long nor short. The only thing Andrea could do was to pray silently and hope that the magic slayer would maintain his current posture. The gust of wind from the west to the east pushed the bullet forward, allowing it to fly at high speed and close to the demon. In the last few seconds, Andrea held her breath and even prayed in her heart, "Don't move, don't move, don't move." At this moment, the magic slayer suddenly turned his head and met her eyes. Andrea felt as if all the blood in her body had frozen. However, the next moment, the bullet fell from the sky and hit him squarely in the back. The huge impact shattered the God's stone, turning it from a black shadow into countless tiny pieces. However, the magic slayer's body was even more shattered than the God's stone. If she had not seen it with her own eyes, she would not have imagined that a stone as wide as 2 fingers could have such amazing destructive power. The magic slayer's thick armor was torn apart like a rag. After the bullet drilled into his body, it directly blasted a large hole in his chest. Blood, flesh, and organs gushed out like a turbid fountain. Perhaps because the hole was too big, the magic slayer tumbled twice before breaking into 2 halves and falling to the ground at the same speed. Only then did Andrea recover from the shock. She swallowed and said, "The target is dead." "We did it?" Maggie asked joyfully. "Yes," Sylvie said with a sigh of relief. The bullet split him in 2. Even if Nana was there, she wouldn't have been able to save him. "Well done." Ashes patted Andrea on the shoulder and then took out the sigil of listening. "Lightning, ask the seagull to rendezvous with us. The mission is over. We can go back now." "Understood," Lightning's reply came quickly from the other end. The sniper rifle was soon dismantled into its spare parts. Once the other team returned from the Eastern Front, they would be able to set off. Everyone relaxed at the thought of being able to return home immediately. Andrea was the only exception. The entire ambush process was normal, just as they had planned, except for the last moment when the magic slayer turned his head. Even now, she could still feel the lingering coldness on her back. Did he notice that she was looking at him? But how was that possible? They were 8 or 9 kilometers apart and separated by a forest. It would be like looking for a needle at the bottom of the sea to find them. Moreover, the magic slayer did not look for them. Instead, he suddenly looked at her as if he had known that she was here. Also, Sylvie should have seen it too. Why didn't she feel anything strange? Or did she think that it was just a coincidence and that it wasn't worth thinking about? After all, the magic slayer was already dead. No matter what he was thinking at that moment, there was no need to investigate the reason behind his actions. Andrea rubbed her forehead, and her fingers suddenly stopped. She remembered that Ash's face was injured when she fought with the magic slayer to protect Leaf. By the way, how long will it take for you to recover from light wounds like a cut on the skin with your own recovery ability? Andrea looked at the superhuman. Ashes shrugged her shoulders. About 1 to 2 hours. Why do you ask? That is to say, the wound will start to heal in 10 minutes, right? Andrea stared at the magic slayer's face and asked, do you feel it getting better now? The magic slayer was stunned and touched her cheek. Strange. It still hurts a little. Sylvie was the first to react. Her expression changed drastically. She forced herself to endure the exhaustion of her body and once again opened her magic eyes. Then, she looked behind everyone with a look of horror. Dang, be careful. Ashes drew her sword and turned around at lightning speed. She swung her sword upward with all her might. With a clang, a black shadow brushed past the blade of the sword and pierced straight into Maggie's body. The force was so great that she was sent flying. Before the others had the time to check on her condition, a tall, slender, and blue humanoid devil slowly appeared in front of them. Found you. The bone-chilling coldness once again enveloped Andrea. She could not believe that the demon in front of her was as calm as the surface of a lake. She did not feel any magic fluctuation from the moment it appeared. Could it be that it had been preparing for today from the very beginning? But such a statement was simply untenable. The senior demon Ursruk had lost Tequila and thousands of demons on the fertile plains in order to set up a trap for Sylvie and Sylvie. Even if the senior demon Ursruk had sensed Sylvie and Sylvie's existence during the Battle of the Northbound Slope and decided to kill them as soon as possible, Ursruk had actually abandoned Tequila and killed thousands of demons on the fertile plains. If the magic slayer was ruthless and did not care about the lives of his subordinates, then what about the holy city? Without the god's stone mine, they would not be able to build the obelisk, which meant that in the next 400 years, the demons would completely lose the opportunity to lay their hands on the fertile plains. If this was the price they had to pay, it was simply too much. Was it really worth the magic slayer's sacrifice? Andrea's mind was a mess, and she could not make sense of it at all. However, Sylvie asked the most important question. Why? Tequila should be more important than us. The magic slayer did not attack immediately. He shook his head slightly and said, I can't tell you. Can't I even know the answer before I die? But you're not dead yet. Osruk's voice was tinged with sarcasm. Even though you're trapped, you still haven't given up, have you? What was he waiting for? Was he waiting for the magic stone to fully recover? But his arm did not show any signs of withering. No matter what, this was an opportunity. Andrea swallowed hard. Judging from the previous battle, Ashes could at most stall the magic slayer for a while, and she did not have much magic power left. Even if she added all her magic power together, they would not be able to increase their chances of winning to more than 50%. As for Sylvie, Camilla, and Maggie, they would only make their chances of winning even lower. The only way to break through was with lightning. She had not shown herself yet, which meant that she had sensed something unusual. If she could guide the seagull to help, they might be able to turn the tables. Instead of attacking now, it was better to ask more questions to stall for time. Andrea already had a lot of questions in her head. She looked at the magic slayer and said in a low voice, I don't understand. Even if we were distracted by the illusion, we couldn't have overlooked an enemy that was lurking nearby. Before we opened fire, we clearly checked our surroundings. We're 8 to 9 kilometers away from Tequila. We won't be able to get there in a short time. Where are you hiding? In the past 6 months, we've dug many underground tunnels, but not at the front line, but behind Tequila. Osrook replied unhurriedly. The entrance to the tunnel is located in the God's stone mining area, which is difficult to discover. These tunnels are buried deep, so it's normal that you've overlooked them. He looked up at the sky. The humans have been monitoring this area, right? Besides, you've never let your guard down along the way. You've seen every movement on the surface. It's this illusion of safety that led you into the trap. There's a tunnel nearby. Andrea felt a vague sense of unease. Even if you're hiding underground, you're just hiding yourself. It's not an easy task to find us in such a large area. Besides, we've been changing our positions many times over the past few days. How did you see us? I didn't see you. You saw me. The Magic Slayer suddenly revealed a ferocious smile. By the way, I'm not the only one who saw me. Where's that flying little guy? If you have a backup plan, he should have arrived by now, right? Andrea felt as if she had fallen into an ice cave. When you see it, it will also see you. This was the characteristic of an alert eye demon. Could it be that he had killed 1,000 eye demon? But its body should be much larger than the Magic Slayer's. Or did Osrook somehow give that flying demon some of the eye demon's abilities? However, none of this was important. She now completely understood where the uneasiness from before came from. Since there was a secret underground tunnel, how could the Magic Slayer be the only one hiding there? The reason why the enemy had not attacked was that it was waiting for reinforcements. It wanted to catch them all in one fell swoop. Just at this moment, several grenades whizzed out of the woods and headed straight for Osrook's side. The Magic Slayer flew into the air and effortlessly dodged this round of surprise attack. The grenades did not slow down at all and plunged into the woods, setting off a series of violent explosions. Before the scorching heat subsided, a dense barrage of gunshots followed and engulfed the Magic Slayer's position. Osrook was forced to fly higher again, and at the same time, his body glowed with a blue light. The God's punishment witches are here. Sylvie exclaimed joyfully. Are you all right? Zoe dashed out of the trees and stood between the Magic Slayer and the ambush team. The other 7 God's punishment witches followed closely behind to protect them. Let's go, we have to get out of here. Andrea's heart was in her throat. She did not have time to explain and shouted at the others. At this moment, Osrook also raised his fist. 2 muffled sounds came from afar, shio, shio. Sylvie's expression changed instantly. No one knew better than her what that sound meant. Watch out, it's the spider demon. 2 black stone pillars flew above their heads in the blink of an eye. With a muffled explosion, a dense number of long needles rained down on the sniper point. Andrea gathered the last of her magic power, accelerated the air in front of her to the limit, and pushed it toward the sky. However, nothing happened. A black light swept across and shattered the magic power that was about to be released. The Magic Slayer had activated the anti-magic field. Elena, who was the closest to Andrea, leaped up and dashed toward a nearby tree with Andrea in her arms. Everything happened in an instant. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.